We're just getting started here at 6:15. So everybody should have a copy of the agenda. Does anybody need a copy of the agenda for tonight? Okay. Separately, Tiffany is handing out or has handed out a copy of the project list which you've received previously via email, but this is a print copy if you didn't bring one with you. So that should be the material before you at present. Okay, so let me just take an opportunity to get us started with a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, this is the last official meeting of the local planning committee. It seems like just yesterday we were gathering at this table for the first time. 5 months has really flown by very quickly. So, but this is our last scheduled meeting. We will conduct this meeting as we have all other meetings with a formal session of the planning committee and then a public session to follow. So keep your comments and thoughts on the ready for when we get to that part of the agenda for tonight. Before we get into the agenda, I do want to take a couple of minutes to thank everybody. But I'm gonna break that everybody down into some specifics. First and foremost, I want to thank every one of the members of the local planning committee at the table. There are some folks who have yet to join us tonight. We've got a couple of latecomers and a couple of people who couldn't be here. We'll personally reach out to them and thank them. It goes without saying that each of you have contributed a tremendous amount of time on your own schedule to this project over the last 5 months, and for many of you, in the months preceding that, you spent a lot of time working locally with Sheena and the mayor and the other mayor, and the city council and CEDC and others to help put together the application that went in. So without naming individual members personally, thank you to all of the LPC members for your work. I want to thank our partners from the state, Department of State, HCR, and ESDC. Named individuals, Mike Yevely deserves a lot of thanks and appreciation for his work in shepherding us through this process. He's done it once before, as have Sarah Crowell and Jamie and John and Crystal from the state team. So if we can, a little round of applause to those guys. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the person responsible for us all being here, Governor Cuomo, and the folks at the highest level in state government. The governor and his team in the executive chamber, looked at the Hudson application when it was recommended for funding and approval back in July of last year, and accepted the REDC's recommendation to award funds to this community. And I think that they deserve a lot of thanks for the faith and confidence in the community at large, not any one individual at this table or in the audience, but everybody here for demonstrating that we're a community that's ready and able and willing to take on this challenge. So thanks to the governor and his team for that vote of support. And then last but not least, the members of the public. A lot of you are familiar faces, having sat in this audience month after month, meeting after meeting, a couple times a month in some cases. So thank you to all of you who come out repeatedly. Thank you to those of you who are here for the first time. Without you, we wouldn't be able to put this project together and be able to speak to that. So, so thank you to the public, and I'd like to applaud the public for their contribution. And then truly, last but not least, I'd like to recognize the two gentlemen standing behind us, Steve Kearney and Phil Chapin. Where are Phil? There he is. Steve and Phil from Stantec have been in the weeds, quite literally, day in, day out, late nights, early mornings, week after week. Steve comes to us from Boston, where he lives, right? Boston?
You got it.
So he makes the trek from sometimes snowier places than Central New York, or the Hudson Valley of New York, having spent time in Central New York, which I was thinking of. So thank you to Steve and to Phil for all your work and what will continue through the next month. So. With that, I'm going to ask Tiffany if she has anything she wants to add in the category of thanks and appreciation.
Well, certainly, having been involved in developing the application from the beginning, I think that we would also be remiss in not thanking Sheena.
Yes.
Salvino. also like to thank the people from the city, Heather Campbell and Rob Perry, who isn't here tonight, as they will be bearing, doing all the heavy lifting from the end of, actually from June forward. So in advance, thank you both for all of the work that you're going to do. And everybody in the community, and also Melissa and Chris Stapleton, who were both there with Sheena and with me when we did the pitch to the Regional Economic Development Council. It was a big day, and they really helped us pull through that. So I thank them for their help as well.
All right. So with thank yous said, and truly heartfelt thanks. I'm just going to do a quick overview of our agenda and timing. So in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Steve. He's going to give us a project update and review community input from the last public meeting and do a brief review of the work completed since the last LPC meeting. And then we'll go into the meat and potatoes of our evening, which is a review of our work product. Everything we've been doing for the last 5 months has led to tonight. It's a two-part work product. First is the strategic plan that we've compiled and that you've all had a chance to review. We're going to talk through that, what we've done, where we are, and where we're going with that over the next 29 days. And then we will go through the project list, which I referred to before, which you all have in front of you. So as we talk through this stuff, please, be looking through that. If you have any questions or concerns you want to raise, now is going to be your time to do that. Following a review of that, we will move to do an adoption of the recommendations from that list for the plan and inclusion in the plan. So that'll be our sort of culmination of all of this. And then we will go through the schedule of what we have left to do for the remainder of the month of March, and then we'll have an opportunity to hear from the public. And our agenda, as always, is 6 to 8. I know some of our members have other conflicts that they will be departing early. If you have to go, by all means, feel free. But we are not wed to 8 o'clock. If we get into conversation, we can go till 9 o'clock. I think is the late hour that we can stay till. So I'm sure you all want to stay that late, but just know that we have that time. I forget. Well, I was going to do that when we get to the plan. Yep. So, okay. So with that, unless anybody have any questions at this point. Okay, Steve, take it away.
All right. Well, again, the presentation part of this is fast tonight because this is, again, one of these working sessions where we'll be talking about the material in front. But as with all of these meetings, I just want to give a quick update of what's happened since we've been here, and also for the community who's here, just to, again, remind everyone, particularly for those who may not have been to some of the other meetings, that, this, again, has been a fast planning process. There are a lot of components to this. Since we've all been together, we have submitted a draft plan document in Word that will later get transformed into a designed layout plan product. That is still to come in March. But a couple of pieces, the residential market analysis, which the planning committee has seen the highlights of, but that's a pretty dense report, the housing task force. We're going to set up a presentation about that from the analyst who did that. That is an event that is going to come forward and still be a part of this. And then all of the other small components to this, each section of the plan. We're at, again, essentially the end. We go into full mode production design within the next 2 weeks. We've got basically a due date of March, at the end of March. So we are going to be constantly going back and forth. In fact, for the LPC group, we have a detailed schedule with specific dates that Matthew will go through when we get to that point in the presentation. And again, just this is what we've been at, since January. These are the key dates that we've had. We had the public meeting at the beginning of February. We have had the LPC meeting number 6 got pushed to tonight. Just got pushed back a little. In the middle had been an LPC subcommittee meeting, which again Matthew will speak to. Public meeting number 3. Just wanted to include some highlights of it. During that presentation and during the public meeting, we gave an overview of the key elements of the plan. For those who are here, Phil walked us through, what is the bridge district, what does it feel like, what does it look like, the streetscape improvements, some highlights of the key projects. And then, of course, we had all of the boards around detailing each of the projects that we were looking at. One part of it was a survey. We actually have now, with that survey, gotten close to 80 responses, so more responses to the survey than actually the community that was there that night. We've extended it, we've let other people submit to it, and I'll show a couple of the highlights from that. But again, one thing I thought was just very interesting is the amount of consistency, as you'll see, of members who have come to this. And I said that at the last meeting, I'll say it again. I recognize many of the faces in the audience, not just who's here at the table. So it's been really a consistent effort by the community to make all of these meetings, which has been great. And again, we went through the refined list of proposed DRI projects. Just from the survey, a couple images. Again, talking about how many people have been consistently here. 80%, 81% have been to all the other meetings, been to other DRI meetings, I should say, not all of them, other DRI meetings, which again just shows a level of community interest, participation. The breakdown of what was most important. This is a consistent theme that has gone throughout this, and there has always been a higher emphasis on the public improvement initiatives being recommended through the DRI. And within this, 59%, 35% looking at the new development, building rehabilitations, and then the 6% of the grants, revolving loans. There is a very small, I didn't make this chart because it's less than 1% on the branding. So, and a branding is probably less than 1% of this overall project, so it probably ends up in the right place. But this is where the community wants us to get to. And again, I should say this has changed slightly over the last couple of days. This is about 2 days old, and everyone can have access to the entire spreadsheet that these come from. One of the questions was, what do you see? What's the future of the Bridge District? What's one word to describe it? Just a fun way, really, to look at what the community is saying. And again, opportunity and exciting were the big ones. But from day one until the end, and I'm sure there'll be discussions tonight, there have been concerns throughout. And I just want to make sure that we are hearing them. We've got, after the public meeting, we got a number of emails. We got a number of emails about some of the projects, the private development projects. They've all been logged, put into this again. When you're talking about maybe 50 people, members were here, we're getting into the 80, 90 levels of input coming back out. So we are still getting information. When it comes to us, when it comes to email or to others, that they get sent to me, all of that information goes to the Department of State, all becomes part of the dialogue and the community participation within this effort. And again, just some of the comments, but these were comments that came up more than once, the ones I put up here. And I'll just read a few of these. Really aligning with the LWRP, and that is a next initiative coming within Hudson. So we really need to make sure that these are aligned. Job creation was a big push. This one, I wanted to include this. All the projects they funded must be in this quote, must be for public or community rather than private benefit. There were a few of those comments. The DRI is about all. As you've seen, I think we've discussed throughout this whole process. But again, how the community input affects the outcome, all of that community input goes in as part of how the Department of State is looking at each of these projects. And then the final one, which I think we'd all agree on, this process can be made much better with one more month of time. Once we've closed this survey today, this can be something that we will put up on the website, so all of this information, every detail that came in, will be available to the community. But again, I wanted to say, just emphasize to the LPC, we really got good feedback. We got a variety of feedback, and we've been sharing them, through the committees and the subcommittees. Real quickly, this is a boring slide. Don't try to read it. I'll read each to you. The draft plan progress, because I'm about to hand it over to Matthew again to really talk about these, because there's a lot that goes into each of these. And when I just want to, the downtown profile reviewed by the LPC members, that's an understatement, as Matthew will emphasize a little bit more. And and we're continuing. Even today, I got a set of more questions about some of these projects that we're just really trying to strengthen to the greatest ability possible, so that they come in strong to the state. On February 16th, the subcommittee from the Planning Committee met to review all of the final projects. You'll be discussing that in a few minutes. And, we, right after that submitted our draft plan Word document to the Department of State. We have now gotten several iterations of edits, and that is our homework, and we will be doing that from now all the way through the weekend until the next version goes in early next week. And so, again, Matthew might elaborate more on what the committee has been doing, and he actually, highlighted that fact. So I'm going to hand it over to Matthew at this stage, and there is a detailed final schedule that I'm going to go through with everyone at the end of this.
Okay.
That's me.
I believe that is you. All right, Governor calling. Is the plan accepted?
Definitely not the governor. Someone who I will say.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve, for that overview. So we'll take a couple of minutes now to talk about, as I called it before, the meat and potatoes, right? The plan that we've developed. And Steve had the slide up there. I don't know, can you put that last slide back up just so it's there for reference? So back to January, the plan started to come together in its written form by way of the draft downtown profile. At a meeting of this planning committee, we selected 4 or 5 individuals who met and reviewed that, gave feedback to Steve and Phil. They sent a second draft back to us. That went out to the downtown committee, profile committee again, as well as all of you to contribute in the most recent version. In the course of time between January 3rd and March 1st, there has been a continual, ongoing, and in-depth review of the projects that you now see before you in the list as to be recommended tonight. And that has been a very multifaceted review process, including a review of projects of this LPC in our prior meetings as they've been presented to us in the summary table that you see before you, but also in the individual slides with the pictures and the layouts and some of the highlights of each of those. So we've each had an opportunity to look at those in the presentation via the meeting, as well as the document distribution before and review time following. In addition to that, Stantec and the sub-consultants that they've brought on board through their expertise in various areas, be it transportation, economic development, market, retail, et cetera, have spent their own time looking at each of those projects and trying to ascertain feasibility, viability, eligibility, and sort of digging into the details. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that none of us spent our own time working on unless you were a project applicant, working with Steve and his folks to really refine what's your budget, what's your capacity, what's your project scope, what's your timeline, all of the key elements that were in that questionnaire that perhaps were not answerable by January 3rd, maybe weren't as clear as needed to be. A lot of time was spent by a lot of folks behind the scenes refining and revising those projects to get us to tonight. And then we had a meeting of the project development subcommittee, which was a selection of 2 members of each of the individual subcommittees that we created for the LPC that met twice over. They met back in, our first meeting was end of January, I believe, right? Or beginning of February, right? End of January. And then we met again on the 16th of February. Both meetings were at the Chamber of Commerce, and we had some really, really detailed conversation. And the second meeting was really the most productive and useful. And a number of folks at the table were here: Jabeen, Michelle, and Elena, and Seth, Betsy, the mayor, both past and current, and a couple other folks I think were at that meeting. And so we had a really good conversation around the projects at that meeting, and it was aided by the fact that the state team had done their own analysis of the projects in the interim and had done some vetting of the projects from a pure feasibility standpoint, and helped give us some feedback on where things looked at that point from their standpoint, which allowed us to weigh the projects a little bit against each other, but also to allow Steve and his team to go back for yet another round of questions with the applicants to look at what they need to further refine. So I feel confident sitting here before you that the project list that you have is solid from the standpoint that no real stone has been left unturned in the review of these individual project recommendations, right? So we'll get back to the projects in just a minute. Before we get to the projects, do you want to say anything on follow-up to what I just covered? Okay. the real substantive thing is this 55-something page document that I have in my hands, which is the strategic investment plan, right? And this document, I need to call out a couple of folks. This is a multi-section document. It's really the downtown profile, which we referred to before, the vision, goals, and strategies, and then a couple of brief sections on implementation and the summary of the meetings that we've had, both public and LPC, and then the project profiles. So I want to take a minute to go through these section by section, and I want to start with a huge round of thanks to Betsy Gramco for her significant contribution of time. On the downtown profile, Betsy took the bull by the horns. She stepped up and said she would be our project scribe on our small little group of 4, and that was in addition to working on the waterfront subcommittee with Colin and some other folks, and really put a lot of time and effort into wordsmithing this document and working collaboratively with a number of folks. So I really am indebted, as we all should be, to Betsy for her contribution. Additionally, Tony Jones, who's not here tonight because he had a conflict, he also spent a lot of time digging into this, providing very, very critical feedback to this particular section of the document. What this section provides is a lot of the story of Hudson. And in that vein, I just want to take a second for everybody to think about where we are today and what this moment in time means. If you've been around Hudson for as long as many of you have, you can go back just 20 years and know that the waterfront used to be full of oil drums and an oil field, right? And thanks to the hard work of a lot of people in this room, and one person in particular to my left here, who used to be in a leading role in development here, that waterfront transformed into what you see today, right? There's a public park with lots of great opportunity for the residents of this community. Where we are is at a turning point to take that work to its next level, right? That's what this Downtown Revitalization Initiative Award has afforded this community, is an opportunity to take that to the next level. And I think we have before us a really solid plan through a process that perhaps was faster than some people might have liked, and perhaps left some questions on the table for people throughout in its speed to get to where we are today. Nothing's ever perfect, nor was this process. I won't be the first to say it was, but I think what we have before us is a really solid plan that puts Hudson on a really solid course going forward. So I hope you all agree with that. I'm not going to read through downtown profile. I will just recognize that several members of the LPC did provide edits to the document, and I want to thank them collectively for doing that. And those edits have been incorporated into the document that will go out next for all of you to review. And I hope if you didn't have a chance to look at it, you will take a look and provide any last feedback that you have on the profile. Next up is the vision and goals section. I want to thank Michael Sadowski, who's not yet with us, right? He hasn't joined us yet. He's on his way up from Bard. Michael was tasked with, or volunteered to spend time reviewing the vision, goals, and strategy section of our report, and he recommended some really thoughtful edits to this document, sort of refining the goals. And so I will also ask that everybody take a look at the goals section of this in the next iteration that goes out, and make sure if there's anything lacking, anything missing, that you please take a moment to look at that. Section 3, the downtown management and implementation strategy, speaks to how we're going to effectuate this plan and put it into reality, right? And that's going to happen through the work of a lot of people, in most part the people who apply, the project applicants, and the work that they're going to undertake if awarded. But also, I'll recognize CEDC, the Columbia County Chamber of Commerce, the Columbia County IDA, some members of this local planning committee who will continue to be involved going forward, the city itself through the Common Council, the Mayor's Office, and supporting boards and committees, and the city IDA. I will highlight that the city IDA is not currently referenced in the report, but will be edited to include that. So if you guys can make a note to do that, that would be great. Okay. Section 4 of our report covers public involvement. And this summarizes the meetings, both of the LPC as well as the public meetings that followed and the public workshops that were held around this process. We will make sure that the survey results that were referenced before are incorporated into this document, as well as any individual summary of individual comments that were received via email through direct contact with Steve, myself, Tiffany, or others, as well as through the website comment section. So we will have a document that fully incorporates the mood of the public and the thoughts of the public to make sure that we have presented to the state review team that's going to look at this. They are fully aware of everybody's thoughts and contributions. So those are the major sections of the report. I highlighted the folks who had a leading role in those. The complementary piece of the strategic investment plan are the project profiles. And Todd and Jeff Hunt have been leading the review of those. Each one of those is several pages. I think it was like 70 pages altogether. Right? That's basically the data that was captured from each of the individual project applicants describing in uniformity the answers to the questions that they had put forward. So do you want to speak to that at all?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, to have that number of applications come out, I think is a great reflection of an engaged community and an opportunity that, yes, we have the DRI, but there are also other funding sources and other programs out there. And one of the things that I know I did kind of looking at it, and I had the support of state staff and some of our peers, were if it doesn't get funded in the DRI, where are some other opportunities for this? So I just want everyone to kind of focus on the fact that, that list of projects goes beyond this group here and the efforts that we have. And I just think that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiffany, did you have anything you want to add? Okay. Okay, great. So before we get into the project review, are there any questions, thoughts, or feedback on the strategic investment plan I just covered? Michelle?
Just maybe one question about what Todd was just mentioning. If there are projects that are not going to be funded through the DRI, is there a way for maybe the consultant team or the state to be supportive of them to help identify other funding sources or ways that they can go forward? Because I know that, yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, we just talked about this about an hour ago, what
Yeah.
our plans are.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And we had talked about having a follow-up session with debriefing on DRI. We anticipate taking a few of you from the LPC and having a debrief session with those projects that are not funded through DRI, maybe recommended for investment in the plan, or those that are, those that are recommended for investment are in the DRI plan, those that are remain in the plan but don't get recommendations for DRI, or those that are taken out of the plan, can come to a debrief session and talk about what our other avenues for funding are, which may be CFA or those that are funding sources that are not inside the CFA, which might be better fits for those projects.
Right.
So absolutely.
And that actually too might be a series of meetings, because once that might occur before we actually know what's going to come out in the round date of the CFAs. So once that's all publicly disclosed, it should be sometime in May, we can come back down and have another workshop in the community that goes even above and beyond whether you're in the DRI or not. Whatever projects are out there throughout the community and what potential funding sources could be natural CFAs.
Yeah. And so I think, we talked at the beginning of this very process about leverage and about ensuring that we capitalize on leverage that's out there, and that this would be in itself a process that leverages future development and future opportunity. So this is going to catalyze a lot of that. And, I'm on the REDC, Todd's on the REDC. We have a sense of what's happening there with both the URI and the DRI and the annual round of CFA. You've got people who are going to be involved in this for a long time. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us, when we leave here tonight and we're no longer gathering as an LPC, but still have a stake in this process, to continue to contribute to those that are going to be administering this going forward with ideas and recommendations about things that maybe we don't even know about today, but maybe come about as a potential project in the future that is eligible for funding and ties into the continued growth. So. Yeah.
I have a question about what happens if a set of projects is identified, presented to the state, they approve them, and then you start on a project and you come up against some insurmountable infrastructure or environmental challenges or something, or the developer disappears or whatever. What's the process for then backing up and selecting
Filler.
alternative projects. And if that's going to happen, I would very much hope that the public could be invited to that process as well.
So there's probably a big hypothetical in there, right? Because we don't know, and we certainly hope that that's not going to happen. But it's the reality of life is that you find those road bumps along the way. So what I would ask is perhaps Sarah, can you speak to the experience to date on the DRI of other communities and where they are if they're far enough along to advise that?
Well, at this point, we're fortunate. All the DRI, not that this hasn't come up in any of the first round DRI communities yet. I mean, it certainly is a possibility. And, I mean, we recognize that this could happen, and that's actually one of the reasons why we asked that the plans include more than just the minimal, the exact dollar figure for the projects. So we would go back and, revisit the plan and vet the projects that are remaining, and the money will stay in the community, and it will continue to be invested in projects that are in the DRI.
Okay. Well, I would just advocate to engage the public in that process as much as feasible.
Yeah, duly noted, and I think that we absolutely will. I don't think you cannot do that. And so may we all think positively that the projects will go swimmingly and we won't hit those pitfalls. But yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's worth noting when we get to the actual projects in a minute and we determine how we adopt this list of recommendations. To Sarah's point, there's an overage in terms of cost, right? There's still some uncertainty in some of the public improvement projects, for example, about what the cost is and where there might be leverage. There might not even be a failure for a project to come to fruition, but maybe they find an offset of funding, and so we free up capital that can then be reutilized for other projects. There will be some projects, I believe, that we're going to have in the plan, maybe aren't fully ready yet. Maybe over the next 6 months or a year, they get more ready, and if they are on the waiting list, that they already had our stamp of approval and they're ready to rise up in the future. So there will be some opportunity for all of that to come to play. Are there any other comments, questions before we get into the projects? Going once?
It said on the timeline on March 1st, the draft plan is being sent to the state.
Correct.
So that's saying that has not yet been sent. That is upon approval.
I should have updated, that was a slide that should have been updated, and that was actually the 21st of February. We submitted a draft plan, very much a draft plan in a Word document format, and that is being updated. We've already gotten, as Matthew's talked, a series of revisions to it. We anticipate getting more, and once we get, and in fact, I'll read this because Matthew will just jump right to this actual schedule of what's about to happen.
Can we actually come back to that?
Okay, sure, we can come back to that. So yeah, at any rate, that's the plan's in, but it gets revised.
Yeah, so what I sent to everybody last week, the 2 documents in my hands, which you have in front of you, that's what went in, clearly labeled as a draft, right? You edited it, Tiffany edited it, I edited it, a lot of other people edited it, and that has then, what I have in my hands is the document that includes all of the edits. This is the next draft that's going to go in. And then you'll all get yet another opportunity to look at this with all the revisions, because we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to weigh in on it. What this doesn't have is the next piece of our conversation, which is a recommended list of projects. The project profiles in their totality of what we received was sent along, and this list was sent to the state in its current form. But our task right now is to look at this and agree to submit this in its recommended form for the state.
When is the last opportunity to edit?
The last opportunity is going to be towards the end of the month. There's going to be a series of edits. So we'll come back to the schedule in total in a minute, but the next big version that you'll see in the middle of the month is with the graphic layout. So you'll see the less choppier version of this without all the track changes and without all of the placeholder photos, but with the nice graphic layout and cover page and all that is what we'll look to give you by the 12th. To have back by the 16th to the state. So, okay. All right. Any other questions on that? If not, we'll move to the project selection list. Okay. So, just a reminder: the project deadline originally was January 3rd. The list before you includes the projects that were submitted by any and all members of the public who responded to that application deadline for eligible projects. Before you is a list that does not include anything new since that date, but what it does have is refinements and adjustments to the projects that were submitted. Over the course of the last 2 months, several projects were consolidated, particularly on the public improvement side, as there seemed to be some necessity to put multimodal transportation and streetscape improvements that were segmented into individual projects into one big bucket. We moved a couple of things around, but that's really the majority of the change here. There were a couple of projects that were determined by way of consultation between applicant and Stantec and the consultant teams to be not ready or ineligible on some level, and those projects were in some cases withdrawn in a collaborative agreement between the applicant and the review teams because they just weren't ready. And so there were a couple of projects that fell out, but not because anybody at this table pushed them out or said they weren't going to be eligible. What remains before you is the list of projects that were sorted, refined, and readjusted in order at the project development subcommittee meeting that took place on the 16th of February. There are still three major categories, or four major categories to this. You have public improvements on page 1 and page 2. On page 3, you'll see the one standalone project for branding and marketing. And you'll see the header on the top of page, on the bottom of page 3 for the section that continues on to page 4, which is the grants and loans, right? So we have three categories of projects in the recommend to advance in the plan. The grand total of total project cost as known is at this current date is $56 million and change. The DRI request within that is $14.3 million, so it's well above the $970,000 or whatever it is that $9,700,000. $970,000. And in the third column, you'll see that the percent of DRI funds to overall project is 26%. And what that means, in a simple number, is that we have a 74% leverage of private or other public dollars coming in to support the projects that are on this list of recommendations. That's as far as economic development statistics go, that's a pretty weighty number of leverage coming in to support this. And that's a testament to a lot of business owners and not-for-profits and private developers and others in the community and who want to invest in this community. So I think that's a pretty significant sign of support.
To add to that, when you look at it, a majority of the public projects, infrastructure projects, are 100% funded through DRI, so there's no leverage there. So the leverage is heavy on the private sector, not the public sector.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. That's a great point, Mike. Thanks. Below that, on page 4, you'll see a header for 3 projects titled Recommended by the LPC Project Development Subcommittee to remain in the plan but not be recommended for DRI funding. And below that, you'll see another list of projects recommended by the LPC Project Development Subcommittee to be removed from the plan. Again, this project list was done in consultation in the meeting on the 16th of the Project Development Subcommittee. Also in attendance at that meeting were members of the state team who were providing their insight and guidance on eligibility, feasibility, and other metrics to help us determine this list as it stands today. Everybody had this list from last week to take a look at, so hopefully everybody's had a chance to do that at this point. Our objective here is to adopt this list as it is recommended and advance it forward in the plan as the list of projects that are recommended. But we'll take a couple of minutes to talk through any individual projects in the top half, and then we'll jump to the secondary categories. So if there's any questions or concerns, let me just say this. I can go through these line by line if people are inclined to do that, but I think we've all looked at these enough. I'm not looking to do that, but if anybody has a question or thought or concern about anything in the public improvement project section, we can certainly stop and talk about them.
Just for the sake of everybody, there might be a question about, in terms of following up with Mike said, however, there are some of these projects in the public improvement that aren't 100% funded. So people in the community might have a question about where is the sourcing of the monies other than DRI, especially for all the city-owned projects, coming from, and has that been defined?
So that would be, and Todd and Jeff can speak better to this, I think I said Jeff can go in. In the project profiles, which will be incorporated into the plan, which will of course be made public, that's outlined by the project applicants in a detailed budget. That's what we looked at to determine feasibility and eligibility, is whether they presented a budget that documented sources and uses of funds. So, Todd, do you want to speak to that further?
Well, I mean, yeah, your question is where does it come from, and it depends on the project, right? And in most cases, it's a portfolio or some spectrum of funding sources, typically not single. But that was very well vetted, not only by the state team, but by the individual submissions in the very beginning. Some of these submissions for projects were 10 and 15 pages, and were in the profile list of the 75 plus pages Jeff and I were assigned. We're only reflective of 3 or 4 of those. So many of these projects had significant backup to them, not necessarily reflected in the categories on the Excel spreadsheet.
Right. I'm just steering that people could look to this.
Yes.
And then they could see, for example, on one of the city projects that talks to $600,000 or $700,000, that there's been an answer to that. There's been a discussion about that the city's not suddenly pulling out of coffers. There's been an analysis about that. So people don't necessarily have to assume that suddenly the city is just,
on the hook.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's right. That was coming in as a surprise. Right. Put all this money on the table.
It's just, that was my point, because it could be a question.
Yeah. That's a great point. And I think it's worth noting that the total project cost under public improvements is a little over $9 million. The DRI request of that is $6.8 million, which represents a significant share of the total of the 9.7. But I noted on my document here from the survey results is that represented, what, 80% in that, give or take, in that slide? 70% of the popular opinion. So I think, and when we had our meetings, we talked a lot about the bedrock, that we got to build the foundation of the infrastructure in the Bridge District to be able to build on top of that, and it has a lot to do with community access and safety and streetscape improvements to make it more attractive, and all of those things. I'm not doing a great job of totally summarizing it, but it also has, for example, citywide Wi-Fi, right? So it's leveraged from this project being focused on the Bridge District, but there's going to be a citywide benefit from a Wi-Fi system that comes in that everybody can tie into. And it sounds like it's robust and interesting. Jeff was talking about it at our last meeting. It's got some great components to it. The Promenade Hill Gateway Park is a big project, and it's central to the city's history as well as the waterfront. And that'll be great when that comes through. So, are there any questions on the public improvement?
The cross street streetscape?
Yep.
Is that formally a Redburn ask?
It wasn't an ask as much as it was a recommendation. Sheena, you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but as part of the recommendation or their development of the WIC project, certainly ties into that. They had put it into their big long-term plans and had done some sizing and budgeting and things of that. It became a public improvement project because it's beneficial beyond an individual business owner, but for the community at large.
And I can add that, Redburn stepped in to they paid for the assessment and the study to do the engineering for that project, so that way we could put in an application to CFA funding. But luckily, we've been awarded the DRI, so it's been pulled away from them. They just supported a city application and provided us with that funding to do the engineering and study around it.
And it won't be their project going forward. The city will sponsor that project and see through to the implementation of that if it's funded. Okay, any other questions on public?
So just a little bit further down the field here, as we get funding and get these projects moving. I see the City of Hudson listed as the project sponsor. There's some $7 million worth of improvements and construction projects of some pretty serious magnitude here. Who's going to manage all of that?
That's a great question.
I know it's a little far away from where we are right now, but you talk about budgeting and construction management, it can be up to 20% of the cost of an entire project.
Right.
Having dabbled in that and worked on a number of large projects, and given the city and its resources that we have currently, what it appears to, where are those bodies going to come from that are going to do all this, that are going to keep track of this and plan all this? And it would take a team, it seems, of 5 to 10 people alone, so just something to think about.
Yeah, so great question. There is, again, a section in here about project implementation, and that speaks in part to the resources that will come to bear for all of these collectively, but for these individually, I'll remind everybody that the project sponsor, as it's written on here today, is not necessarily the firm and final arbiter of the project in its implementation in the long run. The city is going to be the one who puts out, for example, the RFP to award this, and then presumably you get a contract administrator for a heavy construction project who's going to come in and have their team of people who are doing it at cost, and it's all going to be within the confines of the RFP, right, specifically for those public improvement projects, but leveraged by the DPW and Public Works Department, I guess that's the same thing, right, the city's resources and others. And there will be some share in these projects for administrative costs on the part of the HDC and the CEDC and others to make sure that the grant administration, the project administration side of it between the city proper and the state is done in accordance with what's required for the DRI. So does anybody else want to speak to that? Sheena? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but...
Well, I think when we talk about public projects and there's a public administration component, we're in the process of figuring out how we're going to do this. This is an easy question because you look around and there's not a whole lot of city resources and staff to pull from. And I think Colin's point is very well taken, and I think all of us on administrative capacity is limited. And so how we do that might include a group of the LPC to oversee and act as the committee to do the implementation of this, and likely hire project or contract managers moving forward. So, the money begets more work, and we're likely going to need more people to do the work. So in an ideal world, we'll be hiring more people to work on the contract administration. So,
as someone who read through all those projects, that was actually spelled out in several of these larger scale, that project administration and the cost for project administration were part of the total project costs and built into the budget. And then when you looked at the breakdown for it, it was actually in there for administrative and construction management, etc. So
I thought Sheena was going to do it all.
we did too, but then I had to read all those project descriptions.
That's funny, because I thought Colin was doing it all.
Colin was going to volunteer.
Colin, you
Colin
and
volunteered to do it all. Your free time.
CEDC's board was stepping up.
Mike Parker's not here.
Mike is convenient, and Tony's not here either, so yeah, either CEDC rep is here.
I mean, it's a great point.
It
It's
is,
a great
yeah.
concern. That's what we're going to look at when we underwrite all of these projects individually, and there might be adjustments with who the applicant, or who the actual applicant recipient will be. Things could get modified. And I brought this to a lot of people's attention. Such a city of less than 7,000 people with limited resources is doing the same thing as many much larger communities. So, the state realizes we're going to have to help out a bit in project development work, and we're in to make sure that these things get the right guidance.
Did you hear that? The state's going to pay for it all.
But there you are. But to add to that, so that's the sort of administrative fees that looks, and the promises made of job development as we get further down this list. That's a state function as well. We're adding X amount of jobs for X amount of dollars.
Job creation, you mean, like out of a private?
Because I've seen time and time again, unfortunately, where things just, that isn't kept track of. And the monies flow, and then somehow the jobs come for a short period of time, and they leave, or don't come at all. And that's the stuff that really, that sort of that causes a little bit of worry. When we get to more of the private sector business.
The private sector side, yeah, because the public stuff, you mean, once you put the construction in the streets there.
It's a little more straightforward.
Right. That's construction jobs versus long-term full-time jobs or full-time equivalent positions, and that's always a moving target because you just never know for sure. Sometimes you overachieve, sometimes you underachieve. But what I would ask, and as I used to administer state and federal grant programs through the state housing agency where Crystal works, and that was one of the things we had to monitor and check repeatedly. Mike and Crystal and Sarah and her team at Department of State, I'm sure, have through their departments the methods and the means to track it. And it's going to be a requirement of the contractual obligations that any particular individual adheres to in the award of funds, right?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to put it into an absolute.
Right.
It's going to depend on who the applicant is and who the granting entity is. So with ESD, you know, we may not have a hard requirement and say for instance, we're going to, the Kites Nest North Bay Regeneration Project gets funded. We're not going to perhaps have job requirements on that. The compelling reason for that project is to build the capacity in the North Bay. Where if we're dealing with a private sector entity, like let's say the River House project, when we enter into contract there, I would expect that we're going to be administering that, and I would expect that we're going to have some sort of contractual relationships to match the jobs, to match the benefit. We will be doing a cost-benefit analysis as part of that. So ultimately, even though this award gets recommended, the award might be modified based on that cost-benefit analysis. So we'll look at the type of job. We look at everything. How much are they paying in local taxes? How much is being generated by that job in anticipated personal income tax? What's the benefit to the taxpayer of the state of New York to justify the incentive we're going to give to the project? So that work still will occur when there's a job creation piece, at least for our agency, and I'm sure, I know Crystal's even more stringent with the federal money typically, but I'm not sure what the funding source is here.
Yes.
If I could just add though, just because I've been saying this to different people in the city, in China, there is a difference in my mind at least between the manpower, person power on any particular project to do some of that administrative work or all of that administrative work, and the entity, which Sheena sort of touched on, of some kind of successor entity of this group or other people in the public, to have the step back big picture, that you have a lot of projects and a lot of different moving parts with the state helping us, and in that spirit of having the big picture and the community participation, it feels to me like in conjunction with particular contractors who may be hired on a particular project to have a smaller group, I don't know, I'm not necessarily volunteering, 5 people or 6 people, who continue to have a function as this proceeds. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of projects, it's a lot of entities involved, some of them private, that they can, in some capacity, oversee this to say, is this staying on track in the big picture for the goals, for the community? And it just seems to me like a way to structure that in is probably a healthy thing. So, not necessarily to override, but to complement and serve a different purpose.
So I think it's a great point, and I don't want to commit any individual at this table to that tonight, but what I think we should agree on just conceptually is that there could be a small group that becomes the implementation subcommittee, right, of this group, and we continue to inform monthly or quarterly the larger group via email, because there is, you spent 5 months working on this, plus you don't want to walk away from the table and then just wonder what happens, right?
Well, so, I mean, I think about like the to hand off that $3 million project to Rob Perry. I mean, it's like to have a kind of, anyway, I made a point.
So, excellent point, something that I don't even know we've considered yet, so we're making this up a little bit as we go along. It would seem like it's a great idea, but I would say like we're going to be mostly trying to have communications with the mayor and leadership of the city, because that's who the DRI community wants. So I think you look to them to say, how do they want to do this? Do they want to take that informant committee? Do they want? I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea.
Well, I mean, because the mayor is here and has a voice, but he's like one person, and so if there are, a handful of people that could, because he was sort of remarking the other day at a meeting, like, oh my God, this is a lot of work here and a lot of responsibility.
Well, I think what Colin said is really the big question of the next phase. And obviously, this has been an incredible process and a complicated process, but now we're getting to the end of it. Now the fun really kicks in, and it's making these things happen. So we're having a lot of conversations about what the best way is to manage this. Obviously, myself, Sheena, Heather, and Rob Perry cannot do it. And we're going to be relying on several, including me working very closely with Tom DiPietro and the Common Council about ways to utilize the Common Council in the process. So we'll get back to you with a, but I think it's a great idea about a secondary committee, implementation committee. I think that's fascinating.
But if there's anything that a public official likes, it's committees and meetings. So Rick's all over. So Sarah?
I think some of the, so if we're thinking about Colin's question about job creation and some of what's written into project profiles and then following up, I think from my perspective, so some of the most consistent feedback that we've heard from the community is around like jobs for who, and how do we pair job creation with workforce development, job training, and that's really represented, I think, in the language that the local planning committee spent a really long time drafting around. It's in the goals and strategies, and I think that I don't see that in some of the job creation profiles. I don't see that link explicit. Like how are we ensuring that the jobs that are being created through some of these projects are going to local residents, or that there's mechanisms in place for there to be partnerships with existing job training programs or some kind of support. You know, that's like the kind of thing that's the first thing to fall off, because it can be easier for someone to hire someone from outside. And that's what we've seen with so much of Hudson's revitalization, is that people feel like the jobs are not actually available to longtime residents or to people growing up here. So I feel like there's got to be some, to feel comfortable recommending funding for job creation projects in here. I feel like there's a missing link between this workforce development and job training piece and the job creation. Does that make sense? Like there's a...
Yeah, it makes sense. I think there's only so I hear your point. To recommend a project that doesn't adhere to that goal seems disingenuous. And I think we can only do so much to refine the projects as they are currently, right? We have a timeline. We have to make a recommendation around these projects. And I think what we can do at this stage is ask our partners on the state level who are going to take this on at the next level, A, what do they do currently, and B, what can you fold into the process for your underwriting and your cost-benefit analysis and other things that they can help us hold the applicants to a standard through the goals and strategies that we've put forward. And to the extent that we need to make sure that that's reinforced in the final language that we put in here, I think I challenge you all to take another look at this to make sure that that is clearly established. It is inherent to the goals and strategies, but if there's another open statement we need to make about, we hope that so-and-so will do X, Y, and Z to reinforce that, let's do that. But I want to make sure we balance what we are tasked with and what we're capable of doing as a planning committee right now with the practical reality of the implementation of that. Because at a certain level, that's ultimately the responsibility of the person who does the hiring. And they might tell us on paper today, because our strategy and our goals said, you got to hire people, and they'll say, I'm going to hire everybody locally, and then they don't. And we're all going on with our lives and we're doing other things. So it really is ultimately incumbent upon them. So it's a little bit of a difficult spot, but we can make the statement. And
I think, yeah, I think for it, to think that that's going to enter into a contract that we're going to monitor the addresses of who gets hired by private. I mean, we don't do that at any time. I mean, that's somewhat discriminatory. I mean, we're providing money to hire people to provide for the project. And, obviously we would like to support projects, but that's important to the community that are going to hire local. So almost that's what the project development should have informed us too. Is what, and I think we did a lot of work. I know we've worked, for instance, with some of the private sector applicants to have them understand that, the hiring local is very important. I think I've had conversations as well with Sheena and with Mike Tucker and with others, and just hopefully the budget passes with the monies that are anticipated to go into the regional council rounds related to workforce development. It's going to be a big push for us this year. And therefore, this tees up Hudson very well to address this concern and bring in additional money to bring some of the workforce folks at the table, because a lot of our money is capital too, where the workforce money that's going to come through could have some programmatic needs for training and other things. So that strategy is underway. I mean, it's a future promise of what we're going to do, but we're thinking about it.
I would just add to that, I share Sarah's concern because I've been looking at these jobs. I wonder if these skills exist currently in the workforce, and if they don't exist, I think people are going to be pressed to hire. And so, or they're going to say, we need these skills that don't exist. So to the extent that we can keep that in front of people, I think it's very important.
So I'd say two last things. To Mike's point on the workforce development, the money that's hopefully going to come through in the budget, I mean, the onus will be on the REDC to help put that money here to help support that on a broader region, not just for Hudson specifically. It's incumbent upon this community to make sure if those dollars are made available that we go after them. And that we help, because I think one missing thing in this whole project list is a project designed specifically for workforce development, right? And we can't force an applicant to put that in here. We can only say this is what our goal is, right? So if it's missing, it's incumbent upon the people at this table and the community at large to make sure that that happens in this community. And then secondly, it's not going to be a mystery who gets awarded funding from this recommended list and at what dollar amounts and at what the final recommended project scope is. So for those of you that live in this community that know about those projects and know who got money for job creation, hold their feet to the fire to the extent that you can as an individual to ensure that they're hiring locally too, because Mike makes a great point. They can't police that for a lot of different reasons, but they can certainly know that that's our objective at this stage.
One of the activities of it is a success certificate, taking it off of him.
Monitoring extra outreach. I mean, like, once the project is signed, let's, I'm more than happy to say to Basilica, whoever's going to receive funding, let's have a special meeting in the neighborhood to talk about the job opportunity, and I'll go right there with them. I mean, that's I don't think anybody that is on that list that I've been dealing with in the city of Hudson is going to say no to that type of thing. So I'm not even worried about contractually doing it.
Right.
I think we can make it happen, at least offer the opportunities for people as much as possible.
Yeah. So does that give you some peace of mind, Sarah, on that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it highlights, because workforce development it's always been a tricky thing because it was written into part of what the DRI's goal was, but then right away to see that there wasn't support for job training, there's no programming support, there's just infrastructure support, and so there's, and then like you said, we can't force a project in, we don't have a project that is explicit, like that, that's the that seems like a key thing that if we had more time to look for projects, something that seems to, I just wanted, and I said it already, but I do think that really is the, drawing from hearing from the community that's the link that people need to see, and I don't think it's represented in the plan that we're submitting to the state adequately to respond to that community feedback, and so it does seem like making that statement has only so much weight. I do think that that's a question for all of us in the room and everybody to think about how do we continue to really prioritize that, because that's what we've heard consistently.
Yeah. So I hope, Sarah, that you will sign up for that small post-LPC committee and help focus on that issue.
Not even for that, just start thinking again for this upcoming round of CFAs and this workforce money that's going to be highly competitive, that's going to be new, that, Hudson can, so start thinking now, start working now, and I'm more than happy to sit down with anybody to help develop ideas. So.
Yeah. Yep.
And build on existing programs that do exist, connecting those dots.
Well, right, absolutely. And you won't be, on those other funds, you won't be tied to the bridge district, you won't be, so you can put something somewhere else in Hudson and have it tied to the development that's happening in the bridge district as a connector, right? So there's a lot of potential to do that, so. Okay, I'm going to move on then to the next section, which is new development and rehabilitation of existing structures, which is, I don't know, about a dozen projects or so, maybe 15. For a total project cost of $46.2 million and a DRI request of $6.7. So an overall percentage of DRI funds to project cost of 15%. Again, just open the floor if there's questions on any individual project. Sabine?
I have a little confusion and conflict around the Dunn Warehouse, adaptive reuse and environs. In the project abstract, they say that the City of Hudson will use DRI funds to stabilize and prepare the Dunn Warehouse to be future to be determined use. What is the future determined use? Is it going to be private or is it going to be public? And they're asking for $1 million.
Who's best to speak on that, Rich? Sheena? No. I can just jump in because the Dunn Warehouse was one that was the original, when part of the application, it was for the rehabilitation and to develop the space so it could be leased out to, say, a restaurant or part of it for kayaking, possibly for a winter's farmer's market. It's always for a public benefit. It's a city-owned property. Because there was no full plan, and there's also parcels right next to it that, again, was part of it in the beginning, but not well defined. where we got to in this process was, we need to make sure that we can match the Restore New York and get this building ready. And then the LWRP is coming, and to define future use would be for the public. But again, potentially we even looked into it as a local restaurant, like to work the space out into a local restaurateur. Could have a piece of it or all of it, depending. But there was no real entity there. And again, we're always talking about a short time frame for the DRI. So what can we do that makes sense within the 1 to 2 year DRI goals that we're looking at? And that was to really get it ready in that first phase.
So there is a way to check that, to make sure that the Dunn warehouse is used for public use and not just private.
Yeah, I believe that there will be a project development plan administered by HDC.
Not by the HDC, by the City of Hudson.
Yeah, it's a City of Hudson property, and the dream has been, we've had a lot of conversations exactly what that should be, and we've decided to right now stabilize it, get certain fundings to put it aside, but look as a bigger picture about the waterfront development. And the current dream for the Dunn Warehouse has been a community center, possibly indoor-outdoor farmer's market, a place to rent a bicycle, a place to rent a kayak, a place to get a cup of coffee, perhaps a glass of wine, and a place possibly the community can use throughout the year.
Okay, and another thing that I had a little confusion about was the CAS mixed use and transit-oriented development. It says they're going to redevelop the CAS site and demolish the infrastructure and to improve it for mixed-use development. Again, is that public or private? And what is the mixed use?
It'll ultimately be a private development, and the mixed use will be some combination of housing, retail, commercial.
Okay.
And the money would be used for infrastructure improvements, including site grading, environmental remediation if any is necessary, sidewalks, streets, lights, fiber optics.
But it's still private, so if they wanted to just do it for private uses, it's possible that they could just do that and not do it for public.
I'm sorry?
If they wanted to just use it for private, interest and not public, that's possible.
The great thing about it being awarded to the Development Corporation, so the Development Corporation and the city can work together to keep the developer closer. It keeps them, rather than making an individual private sale between the Development Corporation and a private entity, by including public funding in this, really kind of ties them very closely to the city and how that money is used. So there's somewhat of a contractual agreement between the eventual developer and the city to be on the hook for using public investment projects.
It says there's a private partner to be determined. Do we know who the private partner is yet, or?
Not yet. We're still moving through the vetting process. So ideally, we'll have someone selected by the end of March. But I want to hold on because it's a decision by a board of people, and there are several contractors involved, so we have to move through this vetting process very carefully to make sure that they are worthy partners for the city of Hudson.
So when the contract is made, because public funds would go into it, they have to include public interests in it?
They'll include public infrastructure in it.
Okay.
Anything else to be?
Generally, I had a question just about percentages of DRI funds to the overall project. Are these pretty much cast in stone? Are they a moving target?
I think it's a project-by-project thing, but Steve, do you want to speak
Yeah, I
to
just
that?
want to jump in on that because it is a moving target. It is a project-by-project based on just all the different sources, how each came together. A couple of those, as I mentioned, we're still vetting, we've been vetting. We're getting all of the, form license and memos. I'll take one example because I believe if you're looking at the Robert Taylor House is at a 40%. What you're looking at, or is it 27%?
It's 22, 24 more.
Yeah, so what you have before
That
you
is now at 27%. In fact, and the Galvin's, that was, again, we were working through that, and we now have yes, we were okay with that. So if you look at the final sheet, that I didn't.
So what you're going to get now in front of you.
I don't want to confuse everyone.
Yeah. This is a abbreviated version of what we were filtering through, and this is the more accurate list. So you'll see that this is dated as of yesterday, the project summary list. And this does include the revised costs from the 21st, which is, again, through the iterative process of working with the project applicants to refine their numbers. this is what we have resolved to.
So to follow up Betsy's question, while each of the individual projects are moving targets, will the ratio at the end stay approximately the same, the 25, 26 to...
It will, absolutely. I mean,
how do
like,
you manage that if it's all of the projects?
Can I pause before Steve answers? Do you mean the number at the
end,
very bottom?
At the
this
very
number
bottom,
here?
that's
Well,
right.
look, you compare it right now, I bet it's very similar.
Yeah, it's 25% post-adjustment from what it was on the draft as of the 28th, which was 26, so it actually went down. So
No, I'm just saying within a couple of points, it's going to stay in that range.
probably so. I mean, Steve can speak better to this, but because these numbers have been refined so much in analysis by people who know cost estimating, I think that that's probably a safe.
yeah, I don't anticipate, again, there'll be minor fluctuations, but I do not anticipate any at this stage, anything dramatic.
Right. Okay. Any other questions in the section under new development and rehabilitation of existing structures?
Question.
Yeah.
Of the Galvin things, there seems to be a lot of funding there for those. From somebody that we've had questions about, property and values and warehousing properties and not renovating things and leaving things. And there seems to be somebody who's got deep pockets and is self-funded and snaps up property. And I think taking awarded public money to renovate those buildings is wrong. And I just don't see that they have a place in our application. I just don't. It's nothing more than corporate welfare. And, at the cost of all the taxpayers at this table and in this room. So I'm just going to be very clear.
Thank you.
But also somebody who's done a tremendous amount of good. And so it's a complicated.
It's very complicated.
Subject. So I don't know how they ended up staying there, but I mean.
So I think the simple answer to that question is that we couldn't preclude anybody from applying for funds because it was an open process. Anybody who wanted to apply.
Why did we move it to the last page?
Can I continue my answer? So we couldn't tell them no, much like we couldn't tell Basilica or William Farmer and Son or Digifab or anybody else who put in a project application. The second test was, is it feasible? Is it viable? Does it pass the metric test of all of the folks involved looking at it from that perspective? And the answer there, setting aside whoever the applicant was on any individual project, is yes, right? And then I think the third criteria that we looked at as a collective throughout this process is it a project central to the Bridge District, central to the development of the Bridge District, and the community at large, and is there going to be a public benefit from that, right? So weighing the fact that they started with 5 and they're down to 2 or 3, maybe what is it, 2 now in total, I think it's a testament to the fact that several of their projects didn't pass one or all of those metrics, right? This is public dollars open to the public, and I think while there may be community concern about the way that they operate and things that they do, I understand and I appreciate. I'll say I don't live in the city of Hudson, but I work in housing and I have some personal reservations about how they function. Put that at that. That said, there wasn't any disqualifying factor for the projects that remain. In fact, there is a public benefit to be derived from the use of public dollars. Now, the other thing I'll say is that the project cost that you see is significantly pared back from their original request because of the analysis of the members of the LPC and the people behind this process to bring them to a place of maybe more reality about what they should be applying for. And I think the last thing I'll say on that is this is a recommendation, and I appreciate your recognition of your personal reservation against it, and this is going to be something we'll figure out at the end whether we adopt this as it is or not. But it's a recommendation to the state who's going to continue to do their own review of this. There is no certainty that any individual project on this list for a public, nonprofit, or private applicant is going to be funded. So I just want to make sure everybody recognizes that for what it is. And should it stay on, should it come off, reservations will be duly noted. I will highlight, before we even get to it, that one of the projects that they had on the list, the Allen House B&B, we took off for a lot of reasons. But we looked at the merits of the building, the location, the proximity to all the other development that's happening. I know I'm jumping ahead a section here, but said that should be in the plan because whether it's them or somebody else, or we can work with them in the future and find a different source of funding for them, maybe it's private dollars or grant foundations and money, that would be a great project to see come to fruition, but not today, not with our dollars, because that project is just not ready. But the two that remain, I think the folks that met in the project development committee meeting on the 16th.
It's hard to argue with renovating Salvation Army and spending money there.
Exactly.
I get that, but how that's managed in the next phase and how that happens and plays itself out over the next period of time
I hear you loud, but
is the really important.
so that's the critical element, not who the applicant is or the project. And I think you're absolutely right about that.
Can I add one more thing to that, Colin? Your initial response, I totally agree with. But only one reason only why I would support this is that, as we've discussed over the last few months, that these projects are vetted and you have some control of getting projects finished, because he does have, the warehousing and buildings. This one can sit there for who knows how long, but if the DR money is granted to the Galvin Foundation to do the Robert Jenkins House, or Taylor House, sorry, is that we have some control. We can get it done and it's finished. I know it's still a betterment to his warehousing, his number of buildings, but I do believe we have some input on this to get it done, because it's a very intricate part of the whole area in the Water Street area that I think it's something to look at, and it is a small percent of what he's asking for, but we do with that little amount, I think we do have some leverage on him to get this project done, and that's my only reason why I would support it.
Yeah, and to Bob's point, this is a reimbursement program. He's got to spend the money first, he's got to do the work, and he's going to be, as we described earlier, he's going to be in contract. He's going to be held to what he says he's going to do. Unlike him just buying a private building and doing whatever he wants, that's his own business, his own money. But Mike's a pretty tough guy, and Mike's going to hold him.
It's reimbursement, and it's also time limited. We will not
Well, right,
allow
that's
it
the
to,
reimbursement.
you know, he can't, if the project takes 10 years to do, the money's not going to sit there.
Yeah, no, it's, and day in, day out, that's what ESDC and the other state agencies do very well, is they monitor and they recapture, and they won't let the project.
Any agreement with us will say you're going to do X, Y, and Z before you see our incentive proposal.
Right.
And we will not. In fact, before they get their incentive proposal, we have to show X, Y, and Z is done. We have to present that to our board in New York. So one of these projects eventually will be presented publicly by board in New York. Also, that has to agree after we've made the commitment to pay them the money.
Right.
So there's a
lot
of belts and suspenders on any of this.
Yeah. And to Seth's suggestion, we form a little committee that's going to stay on top of this as well. So, all great points, and I appreciate you raising it, Colin. So, thank you.
I have a question. So you described viability and feasibility in judging the project merits, but I do, so that, trying to understand what our role is as a local planning committee, and on the first page of the part 2 of the plan that lays out the project profiles, it has our project selection criteria. And the first of that is alignment with Hudson DRI goals, and the second of that is community support. So I do, and if I understand like what, I am not necessarily an expert on looking at through project budgets and judging viability, but what I understand we each have to bring on this committee is different perspectives from within the community. And so I do want to think, if we're saying this is our recommendation to the state, here's a plan, and we judge these based on community support and alignment with our DRI goals, as the top 2 listed, it does seem like if we're seeing that there's that extent of concern about seeing the Galvin projects in there and a Galvin project to create a restaurant, that being something that I guess I want to push back a little bit on the idea that isn't one of our merits that we're supposed to consider in recommending something to the state. And I think just to return to what Jabin was asking about also about Kaz and the Dunn warehouse, I feel like if that number 1 is alignment with Hudson DRI goals, it does put us as an LPC in a very strange position to be trying to judge, so Kaz and Dunn are these 2 incredibly significant locations in this district and have been sort of, throughout the process, have been referenced as these kind of like flagship projects. What we know is that and they're also, so there's $2 million in here, 20% of our funds or more for Kaz and 10% for Dunn, but it's not, it's impossible to judge them in alignment with the DRI goals because we don't know
the process around the RFP for the CAS warehouse, we don't know what it's going to, we don't know who the developers are, what their proposals are, what it's going to be. So I have no idea if we're going to recommend 20% of the DRI funds to go to a project that then doesn't meet any of the DRI goals. And I think there was, Sheena spoke before to the relationship between the city and HDC as being, that so many of these projects are overseen by the city and by HDC. For me, it also raises the question about the number of projects that are overseen by the HDC, and that, and some of the issues with community trust about that and that quasi-public entity overseeing this process and trusting that it's going to meet the DRI goals and strategies that we laid out enough to say, yes, we recommend that the state give 20% of our funds to that CAS project. It seems to me, I feel like I'm in an uncomfortable position because I'm not able to judge that project based on the goals and strategies that we have.
So the CAS project specifically?
Yeah.
So can I just put you on the spot then? And are you suggesting we don't support the CAS project?
Yes, I would vote to exclude that project if we don't, so what I would propose, what I would feel comfortable as an LPC member saying is that if we know that we have some mechanisms to ensure that it will meet some of our DRI goals and strategies. So for example, there's housing in there. Can it meet some of our strategies that we have in here around housing? If there's going to be private development in there, or can we hold that to do we have some teeth, some way to make sure that there's input in that process and that it meets our goals that we've laid out. I don't know what that mechanism is or what that process is.
So is any of that income-based housing? Is there anything, what I mean?
I think
and if there isn't that process, then I would...
We're not aware of any of that's going on over there for what we're planning over here. So
I'm not sure that's actually a fair statement because
I mean, I've looked, I can't find it, I've sniffed.
I can add that the development appropriation is mission driven, and so around the housing piece, we have to consider workforce housing. So that's tied to an AMI, and this is a whole other conversation we could dive deeply into around AMI and housing and what we're looking at as the development corporation and supporting workforce. So there's a jobs component, business expansion, and attraction component to the mission statement. So those things are things that everyone on the board takes very seriously. So we're at public meetings, and I have shared with you the names of the three contractors that have been interested in the project location. And you're all welcome very much to review all of them, do your own, and submit comments to me in a public meeting at our board meetings. We are going through this very laboriously on who each contractor is, each developer, to figure out who's going to be the best partner for the city, who is going to be the one that we work with going forward. It's not going to be a signed, sealed, and delivered done deal. You're going to be working with us as a partner, and that's what we want to make sure. That's why it's taking so long. Right. So each component of that, as a transportation-oriented development, which is how this thing started, how it ended up going, we got the DRI, and here we are at this moment. So it has always included some component of housing, some component of retail and commercial space. That way we can continue to advance the goals of this DRI and of the city's economic development priorities to expand small businesses. So we are doing the things I think that everyone is asking for here. Building housing, building retail space, building commercial space to support all of these things.
Yeah. Brenda, did you want to speak?
But I think it seems to me in terms of, I don't want to oversimplify this, but in terms of this process, what we can do is preserve the opportunity and say that the opportunity will be, the development will be limited to the criteria that are defined in this plan. Because I think what we don't want to have happen is exclude it and have it sit vacant and be an eyesore and limit other development in the area.
Yeah.
So I think we have to think about this as the first step to provide the infrastructure and the opportunity to develop the site, or not.
Right. To that point as well, this is currently off the tax rolls. So what we're looking at is a $25 million and plus development brings a significant amount of tax dollars to the city of Hudson. So that's also something for us to consider in terms of economic development and what that does for our schools and our county.
Yeah. And as somebody who works in the field of development, particularly housing development, every day, I can tell you you've got three options. You've got Brenda's scenario, which is a vacant lot that continues to sit there and fall down and be a safety and public health hazard, right? You've got the opportunity to sell the land from HDC to some developer who's going to come do whatever the heck they want and build a 10-story high-rise there, right? Or you've got the best scenario possible, which is belts and suspenders through HDC, through the city, through public dollars, and through everything we've discussed prior about every other project on this list, which is the funds, whether it's $2 million, $1 million, or $10 coming through, presumably ESDC is going to come through contractual obligations to meet certain criteria, stay on schedule, and adhere to the goals and strategies of this. To Brenda's point, if we don't include it now, there ain't no coming back later to put $2 million back in after the fact. It's either in now and it gets developed around our goals and strategies, or it's not in the plan. It's that simple.
And if I could just also put the point in, if the concern is, I don't know what the specifics and the details of the CAS project are, and I can't lay my support one way or another until I have it all worked out, because the underlying feeling is I can't trust HDC to do the right thing, then get on the board of HDC. Because operating from a place of mistrust is not a way to function.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would agree that it raised I think that distrust that I'm expressing brings up for our community and our city to think about what is the HDC, who is on that board, who if moving that forward. I raise that question as one that I do think needs to be on the table to think about. I guess I think that thinking about job expansion and commercial business retail, I think some of what's come up in this DRI process is in hearing some of people's fears and concerns is that not all job creation is created equal, not all commercial, that they have different impacts. And I think that so I guess my primary concern returns to what Colin was bringing up in the beginning of what is the follow-up? To say that if the DRI committee is putting this significant percentage of our funds into projects that are then going to go into development, and we didn't have the opportunity to judge them, to have that direct feedback process with the developer who was proposing something. So what mechanisms do we have to hold that development to some of the goals and strategies?
We have it through all the people who are going to be involved on an ongoing basis. I mean, none of us had the opportunity to talk to every single applicant about every component part of what they're going to do, right? It's just impossible, right?
The state staff does in implementing the project and reimbursing, and we're putting very well-crafted, better-defined visions and strategies than we've ever had before, not only for this community, but for the region in general, in a black and white document that we can constantly refer back to and check ourselves with. The implementation side of it, that was one of the best things I've heard tonight, this idea of an implementation committee, and that people are stepping up and saying, I want to be part of that. If I was a state staffer, I'd be like, amen.
Right. Oftentimes
look at them all over here. They're like, why didn't we think of this before?
Wait, Todd, who said I want to...
You said you were going to chair it, I thought.
Now, wait a minute.
I know how this rolls. I'm assuming there's several of us that are drafted to it. So
here's the other thing I would say, Sarah. I think that the thing you have to find some comfort in, if you will, to use the word, is that you have in the current leadership of HDC the same person who wrote this application for the DRI, or same people, right? And the same person who's standing here explaining to you. While she can't tell you everything about it because it is, to a certain extent, a process that has to have some degree of, I don't want to call it secrecy, that's the wrong word. What's the word? Confidentiality, thank you, because of who's involved in what they've proposed. I think the other belt and suspender that you have is that the three developers that they're thinking about working with and talking with and vetting right now all responded to a public RFP that laid out its own criteria that in itself established we want housing and we want housing at varying levels and we want public space and we want this, that, and the other, right? So it's an offshoot of this. It's there. If you haven't read the RFP, maybe you can't. I think that I'm just trying to reinforce that you got the same brain working on both sides of the house here, and while you can't talk to every piece of it, you have to sort of take the wink and the nod that things are there, right? And go to the meetings and listen to what they say. And you got, from my own personal experience working with all three of them, very good developers who will do really solid work for the city of Hudson.
I think also all of these projects, especially these redevelopment projects, and I will tell you my experience, again, in Glens Falls, what I've seen in some of the DRIs, all of them have these real estate development projects that are less than defined at this stage because of the process and having the money up. Usually the money doesn't get front loaded this way, so you're absolutely right in understanding this consternation. I understand this consternation is going through, because it is a process that's a little different. But while they all have that type of development, ultimately the planning board is going to have to approve whatever gets done here. Ultimately, the HDC is going to have to scope the development. Most likely, they're going to require some sort of pilot of paper to make it happen. So there's so many different layers of public approvals that there's going to be countless opportunities for public comment. Our money will have a public hearing requirement. We're going to come out very specifically for every single project we fund. We will do a public hearing in this town. And we cannot move the project forward if there's negative public comments on it. It just will continue a cycle of us trying to address those negative comments.
Yeah.
And
So
the-
Sarah,
Note to self. So I
fill
mean,
your
if it's not
calendar.
done right,
Lots
it's not
of
going to happen.
And I mean, remind the projects being included in the plan is the first step to getting awarded. Not every, I mean, there's more than 9.7 million. Not every project will receive funding.
Right.
It's recommended, and as the state vets those projects and determines where that money goes, and this goes for all the projects, not just this one. The vetting includes exactly what you're talking about. It looks again at the goals and the strategies and the vision of the DRI, of that DRI. It also looks at the goals and strategy, feasibility and other criteria, but that's central to the decision, and it takes into account not just what's in the plan, but what's been, what's happened since that process, because these projects are evolving.
It only gets tougher if you're a project to actually move forward towards that dollar amount.
That's right.
This is the easiest part
Right.
as a project.
This is the high bar.
And it should be, because that's what keeps refining it and holding the standards that you're expressing, prioritization and value for.
Yeah. It's all very good thinking, and this is a good conversation to have. So thank you for raising that. I appreciate it.
Is it possible for the LPC to make specific recommendations about that? Especially in terms of housing, like what percentage or, what some of those priorities are, or no? I mean, that's just going to be developed after.
I mean, I think then what you're doing is you're going beyond what our scope of work was, which as a group was to define vision and goals and the strategies. And we met as groups and we defined all of that stuff. If we were to nitpick every single project, it would be a burden on this group.
But this is a huge part of the project. It's 20% funding.
I realize that, and I think that perhaps what we can do as individuals is share our comments with HDC about what they're ultimately going to require. Because remember, this is still a fluid process for them. They put out an RFP, somebody responded to it. They haven't signed a contract yet. So it's not. So I guess the answer then is the onus is not on us to establish that, but for them to do that and for them to hear us in this moment and then going forward about what we think. But I think you also should go to the meeting and see the presentation and see what's already in there, because you might see that there is something that you're looking for already there. Right?
So questions I would ask if we were to put limitations on, say, an affordability requirement, the first question I'd have in underwriting it, is this a favorable project now? Is this feasible to be developed at this location with these requirements? Because that changes the whole financing stack for a project and becomes a completely different thing than what was envisioned here.
Right.
Because limitations on affordability puts it into a different category of getting funded.
But I'm wondering if this is really a slightly different question. I think what I'm hearing is the questions about accountability. Who's ultimately accountable that the project matches the goals set forth in the plan? Is that what you're asking? So is it with the developer or is it with the state? I mean, we understand the limits of our engagement, but after it leaves us, who's ultimately responsible?
I think there's multiple layers, and there's reciprocity within it. So you have the RFP and what was proposed. You have what is identified as strategies and priorities in the vision for the LPC, which falls to individual LPC members to be engaged and to follow through. You have the entity HDC, which issued the RFP, and then you have multiple, depending on the state contractual agreement, it could be one or it could be two, looking at a mixed-use project. So, yeah, right?
And then you've got the Hudson Planning Board.
Well, you're going to have to go through site plan review.
I think that was not really accurate, because I think the planning board and site plan review are going to be looking within their particular scope, not at the scope of the DRI.
Agreed, but it will be another forum, a required forum for public input.
Right.
So I think, if you look through this process of going through a brick and mortar project, we just identified 4 or 5 checkpoints right there. And the fact that we're having this dialogue with 70-ish people in the room right now, I'm guessing.
And a video camera.
And the video camera. I mean, we're adding those accountability points right now and perspectives with all the dialogue.
Yeah.
And I have two other board members in the room who are hearing this, and I have board members who are following this whole DRI process, not to mention the fact that I've been at every single one of these, answering these questions, at least attempting to, and sharing as much information I can with this committee and the community at large. And we have public board meetings. So if you have comments and are things that you would like to see happen in this particular location, by all means share those with the board of directors. And that's part of this dialogue going forward, because we want to make sure we're doing a project that's not shunned by the community, but accepted and that is a positive impact on the community. It's our whole mission. So we're moving through that process. So please do submit your comments.
Okay. Anything else in the new development and rehabilitation of existing structures subsection of the list? Okay. Wayfinding and signage. One project to be administered by HDC at the outset, if not throughout, and that will be pretty straightforward, wayfinding and signage. And then, are there any questions on wayfinding and signage?
We had citywide then, correct?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. Okay, grants and loans. So, as a reminder, the grants and loans as prescribed by the DRI guidance from the state is limited to a total ask of $600,000. So in our last meeting, the two projects that you see here were at differing amounts than what you see before us. On the 16th we met, we talked through the scope of these. I'm just going to highlight the both of them individually. First and foremost, the MWBE business support initiative was a much higher ask initially. We lowered it to $100,000 and made some recommendations that are in the notes of the project application regarding the per award threshold to be high enough to be beneficial, but low enough to ensure that there's enough to go around. So let's say it's $5,000 or $10,000, you can help 10 or 20 different individuals or businesses in that program. The Homeowner Improvement Grant Program, this is intended to assist the homeowners in the Bridge District between 2nd Street and Front Street from end to end, north end, south end, with a lot of particulars to be determined, and we're going to look at existing homeowner grant programs that exist in the state's bevy of financing sources to model this and determine what the individual per homeowner award would be. Some state programs go as high as $40,000 per home to help with both interior and exterior. We're going to talk about making sure that it's preservation of interior as well as exterior, not just a facade improvement on somebody's house. So we believe that when you allocate the $500,000 over, similarly to the MWBE program, a capped amount over the number of homes in that district, you can get a significant number of homes to benefit from that. And furthermore, because it's central to one of the strategies and goals, we talked a lot throughout this process about affordability on many fronts, not the least of which is housing. One of the burdens that many people have in a homeownership situation is care and maintenance of their home, right? Preservation of the major mechanicals, including roofs and siding and boilers and things, which we hope this will ultimately help people with. It'll help people maintain ownership in their homes. And it's one of the many elements that addresses housing in its various forms throughout the Bridge District. So we've got homeowners, you've got renters at all different income levels. You've got that through the Hudson Housing Authority's project development plan to do the senior mixed income mixed use facility on Columbia Street, right? And then what comes of CAS and everything in between. So we believe that there's quite a lot of stratified and varied affordable housing opportunities throughout the various programs. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I wanted to bring up on the, one thing about women and minority-owned business enterprises and the certification program, so everybody understands that.
Yes.
This is going to be one of the significant things in implementing projects that we have to understand. Every dollar that the state gives is going to have a requirement that a percentage of that has to go towards women minority-owned business enterprises that are certified by the state of New York. So typically, is 30%. So for every dollar spent, 30 cents of that is going to have to go to benefit a contractor or an entity that is women, minority-owned business enterprise certified by the state of New York. So, you know, that's something that I've actually, I have some concerns of in order to have the capacity to meet that requirement. We're going to want to maximize that requirement, but are we going to have contractors? So C's work as a community to identify people that are either certified or that are able to be certified. We will provide that guidance, and in fact, on Wednesday 8th, is that
next Thursday.
A week from today, March 8th in Albany, there will be a workshop and expo, an all-day workshop and expo that's open to the public, all about women, minority-owned business enterprise certification that we're hosting, and we'll walk people through that process. So please, you know, help. That we're going to need some help on that. I've already been, you know, making sure my counterparts in the Mid-Hudson understand that and what enterprises are there, us in the Albany area, to make sure that. But would love to have homegrown enterprises here partake in that benefit.
And veteran-owned businesses.
Yes, right.
I can't remember what percentage.
It's
an additional,
yeah. We're usually women, minority-owned businesses. Usually 30%. They'll look at the they'll look at the demographics of the area and determine whether it's, you know, split between women enterprises. But I think service disabled runs between 3 and 5%. Yeah, and we'll be on top of that.
That's a requirement for every one of
every one of the state grants.
Yeah, just in general.
I think the veteran is not required. No, there aren't enough. It will be.
Right. They will look at it and they'll say if there's no chance of a service-disabled veteran doing something, say for instance in the middle of the Adirondack, because it's just unlikely that that will happen. They will inform the decision based on that. But I know, based on doing work in Hudson, we're going to be looking at 30%, and with a heavy minority component of that.
Yeah. And waivers are almost impossible.
So I wanted to move back to the home improvement program. One of the barriers often to this kind of funding is the requirement for a match. Is it too granular to ask whether or not this program would require a match?
So that is a great question. It's not determined some of the development of the eligibility and award of funds, and or meaning the amount of funds, and the administration is TBD. And what I should say is that in our last meeting, I recommended you to help us build that program. So if you would be so kind as to step forward and work with
Did I tell you I'm moving next week?
No.
I'm just kidding.
No. Great.
I think I'm leaving the country.
That's great. So
you're here tonight.
Yes. Farewell.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on this. Initially, when we spoke about both of these programs, we talked about a combination of the grant and loan program along with the revolving loan aspect to it.
On the MWBE piece, yeah.
Right, but so their criteria is that in terms of grants, they can only give out a total of $600,000. But that doesn't include the component of saying that we can take money out of the DRI and then have that as a component that the HDC can administer. And I'd also like to revisit just the adjustment. Because even what you're saying, if there's going to be those opportunities, let's say there's 30%, the prospective businesses are going to need to be able to capitalize those opportunities. And $100,000 is a quarter of what we initially put in, which was, I believe, too low. And I voiced my concern at that at 2 meetings ago.
We talked about that with CEDC and with the state, and the county even has trouble giving away money. They're not fully funded. They've not been able to find people that want to access these funds. And we still do have county funds available in addition to these.
Well, the SBA money, in my research, it was only the SBA money, which has a whole set of very limited and very tight criteria, which doesn't match a lot of fundamental business needs, especially of technology companies or a variety of entrepreneurial companies are not met by the standard SBA process.
Well, I wish Mike was here because he spoke to this very clearly, and it was really their recommendation that we break it 100, 500.
And if I might add too, that we're also working in an area with a very small commercial district, so we're not even like, for example, on the other side on State and Plum District, we're not even zoned for commercial small business at this point. So we'd be focusing on what is the rest of the waterfront, potentially at the Academy Development site and the bottom part of Orange Street. So we're really in a very tight spot to even give out $100,000. So we want to, yes, we want to be able to kind of market that and make sure that we're getting our women and minority-owned businesses and veteran businesses up and running and where build capacity where possible. What we're talking about, a very small geographical location. And to Beth's point, we have SBA loans that already work inside of this. We're hoping to use MWBD money for matches as well.
To your point, and also we have a JDA program in ESD specifically geared towards women and minority-owned businesses. It works very fast. It's a loan. It's very low interest, and it's only based when they have the contract. So they can come to us and say, I can't bid this. I'm not. I know I can do the work, but I don't have the capacity to do the bond that's required for the job. I don't have the requirements to do the purchase of the material. They can come to us, and we will make that loan based on that contract, which it's been very popular with folks to get them into work.
I really hope this too has an impact on capacity, because as a developer who solicits these businesses, it's very hard to find them. And so I think to the extent that we can find, that we can build capacity to increase the number of businesses by offering these funds, that we'll be able to get more people that will apply for them, and we'll certify and apply for them.
Because we're saying that these funds, these specific funds are only for businesses that are located in the district.
Correct. Correct. The other component, though, and I think you made a really good point, is that this could be the critical mass and setting the structure for additional rounds of funding as we show the demand and the potential exceeds what has happened here. So some of the conversation with the state staff and some of the conversation with CEDC was that this could very much illustrate how to build these programs more robustly, and this fit well into the structure, the formulaic structure of the percentages that we were talking about.
Yeah.
So this by no means is an end, it's a beginning to new programs and illustrating to the state the demand and the potential for more within the Village District itself.
I would just suggest that I think if the challenge in this particular kind of business support program is finding people thinking about like the scale that Hudson is, who could sit on the board of people, like who could help to oversee that program and administer that program that has relationships within the community that could help to make it a program that could reach those who would most benefit from it. And I think that looking at the HDC as a lead on that, I think there should be a conversation about what is a more representative board of people that could oversee that program and build
Great point. I'm just going to go back and remind you that who you see as the project sponsor is the sponsor. That doesn't mean that they're going to implement it. They're the person to whom the state's going to call and work with after our recommendation is put forward. They're in turn going to go out and say, hey, we need somebody. So on the housing thing, I was saying at our meeting last, I want Brenda or some entity like Brenda's to be engaged to administer the housing grant program.
Yeah, so a parallel conversation about that.
Yeah,
exactly. You're also talking about a more diverse decision-making, please.
And it might be that HDC is just holding this money at this point. There might be a better owner of this program than HDC.
That's my point. Right, exactly.
You know, we're just kind of holding it. So there's $100,000 sitting in an account that says, you know, we want to support the capacity and growth of women and minority-owned businesses. Is there a better organization to do this?
Yeah, and these notes don't reflect it in full. But the meeting that we had, we talked about, okay, so this is going to leverage CEDC, and it's going to leverage the chamber, and it's going to leverage other partners who are going to be a collective who's going to help administer this, and maybe not the ultimate body, but the people who are going to help develop the scope and the design and the implementation and all of that stuff. So there'll be a lot of people you're welcome to participate in that as well. And I think the only other thing, Randall, that I would remind you about with respect to this is, as much as any other project, to Sarah's earlier point, is that there's going to be time constraints on this as much as there is on anything else. So if you bite off more than you can chew and you can't spend $100,000 or $200,000 in the year or two that we're awarded, we're going to be left holding the bag too, right? And so we don't want to take money that we can't spend if we're really truly not there yet with the capacity to spend, let alone the capacity to build. So.
Well, that leads right into my next question, where do you have a list of certified minority businesses in Hudson currently?
Yes, I mean, there's a certified list of businesses statewide. I don't know how they show it. Probably shows it by
It's
business.
individual by zip code, it's individual by region, or by DC, or something.
Yeah, ESDC is the certifying agency, and they track all that
I
stuff.
know.
It's all online, so.
Last time, there are not very many certified.
It's going to be hard to spend.
There's like
Right.
a landscaping company, or very, 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 very few in Hudson.
We are very cognizant.
Yes, they're offline, okay.
Which is why Mike made a great suggestion. If you know...
The workshop.
Yeah, the workshop, and just go on ESDC's website and learn about what it takes to get certified as an MWBE and get on that list so that that list grows.
So, just a ignorant tactical, there's, as Sheena said, my instinct is, well, there's not many in Hudson or Columbia County. So how do some of these projects then move forward? It's that they find or incorporate somebody from...
I mean, I'll give you an honest discussion. I have a friend from Queens. His cousin is a contractor that is in Putnam County, does so much work for New Paltz. He's an African-American gentleman,
Yeah.
very competent contractor. He's certified. I told him about Hudson. We might need you up here,
I get
you
it.
know,
Okay.
but I would prefer to find or organically grow people here
So
in the region.
Workforce development, it's right on.
Restricted to-
No.
Oh.
That's the trick. Get them ready.
It's the 30% MWB is the requirement, and if they can be local, but you can't say because there is nobody local, you're not gonna, that's not an excuse for waiting.
Right, you can't, you have, yeah, okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Is there, I'm
Yeah.
wondering, is there, after March 8th, is there another meeting on the schedule, or another workshop on the schedule?
Mike, that question for you. After March 8th, is there another MWB workshop?
So, well, yes, I will get a flyer out to the LPC at least, and then we can try to get it distributed to the community. So, there is March 8th, and then there are going to be other ones across the state, not in the Albany area. So I don't know where the next one is, and they do one in our region every 2 years. So there's 10 regions. They do every region every 2 years. So I know there's going to be more this year. They're going to be stacked up, but it might be in Utica, it might be in New York City next.
Okay. Is there an opportunity for webinar or virtual participation? If we could set something up at the library, or, I mean, if we could have a community hub here in a way? Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
Oh,
an
yeah,
expo.
it's-
It's like an expo. It's like a conference somewhat, and there would be panels. Like I know I'm emceeing one panel on the 8th, and I'm
Got it.
sitting on another panel. So I don't know if those are. I don't believe those are webcasts.
Got it, got it.
There's lots of resources online.
It's more like an expo and a webinar and a workshop. Got it.
Okay, so we're just over the 8 o'clock hour. We've gone through the individual sections of the list of projects that are currently to be recommended. Again, totaling $56 million in total project cost, $14.2 million in DRI request for a percentage of 25% of DRI funds to overall project cost. Very quickly, coming out of that project development subcommittee meeting on the 16th, there were 3 projects that were recommended to remove from the funding list to the recommended but not fund, or to the included but not recommended for funding. That includes the electric bus, the Allen Street bed and breakfast, and the warehouse facade improvements and digifab expansion. Does anybody have questions on that after reading through any of those? And then recommended by the LPC Development Subcommittee to be removed from the plan for a number of reasons, including feedback that was provided by the state teams in their review of some of these projects and their feasibility, and that's a pretty critical element. If we know today that if we include it in the plan and it's going to go to the state and it's not ready to go to the state, it would be disingenuous of us to put it in there. And so those included the skate park, the North Bay connector. Now that one was actually moved. You'll see the note here that it was added to the multimodal circulation and connectivity improvement. So it was removed as a standalone project and incorporated into the public improvements. The bioenergy park, the cybersecurity workforce development, and then upgrade and extend the tourism and community access to the Hudson waterfront. This is really Hudson Cruises. And While the whole of the project wasn't necessarily deemed to be feasible at this time, there was a desire to include a component part of their application by way of the pump out station, which is critical for the development of the waterfront. So that was incorporated as an element of the Point Pier project. So another one that was absorbed up top within the projects we previously recommended.
Could you tell me what the limits of the limitations were of the bioenergy part?
Yeah, I'll give you my synopsis and then I'll ask Tiffany and others to weigh in. The bioenergy park, there was concern about the volume of truck traffic that might need to come into the Bridge District in an area that is dominated by housing and residential, particularly small children, as well as the fact that Mike Tucker, who's not here tonight, was at that meeting and identified for us that there's conversation about this as perhaps a larger regional effort. And a county effort. A county effort outside of the Bridge District, and that there may be a better suited place for this to go. So it's not dead by any means. We think there's merit to it, just not in the Bridge District. And did I get it correct?
Exactly right.
Okay. All right. Are there questions on any of the other ones?
Can I just add, I think, so on my partial understanding of that project, I would just say that I think what I understand about that project is that it does need to be located in the urban core in order to power what, based on how the digester works, in order for what it powers. And so I guess I have some remaining questions about whether it would create the truck traffic or the amount of trucks going down there that are of concern, as someone who really is concerned about kids being down there.
We hope you are.
And whether it's, so I guess that is just as an LPC member a project that I would be interested in seeing happen, and better understand the reasons why it would be cut, or to see it on our plan as something that we would like to see happen at some point or further understand.
Well, the thing that you could do to make it easy for yourself is have a phone call with Mike Tucker. He's very informed about it. He laid it out in spades. It's about size, it's about trucks, it's about volume, it's about odor, it's about the fact that the county has identified one or two other sites that fit a geographic core. I'm not saying that I know he's right, but he's very informed about it. He might answer a lot of those questions because he poured through that like very clearly to make it seem like
We can't rule that out. I'm not saying it is.
It's true. That was not my
He didn't raise that as an issue, and he's not shy about doing that. He's not here, so I can't speak for him, but it's a valid point.
Sorry, just while we're on the truck traffic thing, is the city moving closer, negotiating, working with Colorado? And we had a number of walks in our group early on in the fall, and we walked down by the river, and we, talked about the potential of possibly moving the truck crossing, at least in our little group, and brought it up a number of times, and that doesn't appear anywhere here. And it seems to make everybody, at least from a quick straw poll, made everybody sort of happy. And that's just finished. But is it not a possibility?
If I could speak to that, from my understanding of it, because the DRI is very time limited, there are so many stakeholders involved in that discussion. CSX, the City of Hudson, there are 2 lawsuits right now. We've got DOT, Colorado, that it could be handled as a DRI project because of the time limitation factor. But that's not to say that it's not being handled. It's at the, I know DOT and CSX, they're all talking right now about what to do. We just couldn't see a way to make it a project in the DRI.
It's just not in this. Yeah. And the lawsuit may be, one of the more prominent issues among those, because you can't really get into it until those issues are settled. But what I can tell you is that there's lots of ongoing conversation, and will be, and cameras recording it, that the state is committed to working on this issue with the city, and the city's committed on working on it with Colorado, and finding a path forward so that ultimately, hopefully sooner than later, that will materialize in a move that benefits the pedestrian flow, the vehicular flow, and the functional usability and safety of the waterfront. It is all part of the multimodal stuff for what we can do with it in its current state, and then thinking about how those funds are utilized today with the knowledge that there may be a transition to something different in the future. So,
Would it be eligible for CFA funding?
I think ultimately anything future is eligible if it fits the box for all that, but it also could be eligible for a lot of other funding sources that are in the works right now as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to achieve that goal, just as Betsy pointed out, not within the confines of our time frame.
It just didn't fit for numerous reasons in the structure that we had.
Right. Now, as we leave here tonight, and our next task as individuals is to look at this report. You were on the waterfront subcommittee, and I know that there was a transportation subcommittee that was led by Tiffany. If you guys can look at this and make sure that the document speaks to the ultimate desire of the committee, so it's not left out of the plan, so that it's there as the guide for the future. I think that's one way we can continue to reinforce that. But with the knowledge that it's not off the table, it's just not a project that came to fruition for this list. Is that a fair and accurate statement?
The project can still be held to the concepts, the strategy, the vision. It just did not necessarily fit into the time frame and constrictions of the project.
That's right. Okay, so our next, unless there's any other questions on this list, our next task for this evening is to adopt and approve the list as presented on the double-sided piece of paper that you have here. This is the list of projects recommended for funding to be included within the City of Hudson's Downtown Revitalization Initiative Strategic Investment Plan. We have prepared a document that everybody can sign as an endorsement to this, with an opportunity that if you have a specific project-related ethical reason to recuse yourself, you may do so on a project-by-project basis. If you are a project applicant or otherwise have an ethical restriction, and Sarah or somebody, if you want to speak, should I encapsulate that sufficiently for your purposes?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to, you don't want to be, you want to be recusing yourself from specific projects if you're the sponsor, if you have a financial, and any conflict of interest. I think if you all received the packets at the beginning of this with the description as to what a conflict of interest is, and if anyone has any questions, we can either try to answer them or refer you to.
Okay. So I guess what I'd like to do is just call for a show of hands if everybody is in agreement that we endorse the project recommendations as presented with any noted recusals that can be filled out on this form. Yeah.
I have a quick point of process. So is the plan that we vote on that and then we hear public input? Or is there, is that part of the meeting?
There is a public comment period.
That public comment. Is it possible to hear public comment before we?
If there's, so I'm gonna open it up for approval of the committee. If everybody's okay with reversing that process, but what I will say is that this list of projects came out of lots of public input, so it's not like this is the first time. So I just want to make sure that that is appropriately considered. That we hear from people that this list came from all of that public input over the last few weeks.
Right. I guess I would share that with the committee. That would be my personal desire, would be to hear what the people in the room are thinking before. But I would put that to the rest of the committee.
I mean, if there's no opposition, I'm okay with that.
Mr. Chair, you're losing your LPC group. They're dwindling.
Right. You mean in terms of people here to endorse the project list, right? So that would be a vote against opening it for public comment at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but how do you want to do this then? Before. Okay.
Just to be clear, if we disagree with some of these things, are we abstaining or are we voting?
So the form as drafted is, it reads as follows: as the planning phase of the DRI comes to a close, a key commitment requested by the LPC is to endorse the projects being recommended for funding. This can be done either by endorsing the complete list or by endorsing the list but including exceptions for specific projects, as previously discussed around an ethical obligation to recuse yourself, right? So you
That's the exception. It's
correct.
not that you're voting for some and not for...
Correct.
There's only one exception to be
conflicting ethical duty to...
It's for the audience, I wanted to be clear about that.
Yeah. And so the form reads, I endorse the full list of projects being recommended for DRI funding. You can check yes or no. So you can either vote it full or not. And then the projects as described are laid out in this table on the front and the back. And then if you do have a specific refusal, you check in the box next to it, and then you would outline why you're recusing yourself from that for whatever ethical reason, financial, participatory, or otherwise. So that's...
So we have the option to approve the whole list as it is.
Correct.
Or to say no.
Correct. Yeah, we're not doing a line-by-line selection of projects, because that we've gotten to that point through the subcommittee work and through all of the review of projects over the last 2 months. Yeah.
So if we approve the slate by voice, which it sounds like we're going to do,
yeah.
That is with the understanding that minus anything from which we recuse ourselves on the form.
Correct. And so we adopt it by voice vote, and then everybody fills this out. And if you don't have a recusal, you just put your name on it and check yes or no. That was your selection. And then if you have a recusal, you just add that to the sheet. And then we will collect all those for the members that remain. So
if we're continuing to draft this, by this vote tonight, we're saying there's not going to be anything substantially different about these projects going forward.
That is
the substance of those projects is as defined in these documents.
Right, subject to the projects being recommended to the state and the work we described previously on the state team's part at each of the respective agencies doing their continued due diligence, underwriting, and project review and assessment.
Just want to make sure everybody understands that.
That's a great question. Everybody hear the answer? Is everybody comfortable with that?
So what, is it just majority rules? Like, so what if the significant number of, hypothetically, LPC members say no?
Then we find ourselves at a crossroads that I hope we don't find ourselves at. But, so I think we have a split consensus here. There's desire to hear from the public, and then there's...
Or it could be handed out. Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
Majority means 13 out of 23 appointed LPC members, or majority who's present now? It should be all.
If anyone is not here, they can fill his name out for waiting.
Okay, so it's a majority of the roll, and we will follow up with those that are not here. Okay, did everybody hear that?
No, sorry.
So it'll be a majority of the all, and we will go to the individuals who are not here and get their vote, and we'll have them recorded on the document. So I guess, why don't we agree to this? If there's no objection, the form is being handed out to everybody, okay? You can fill out this form if you have to go. You can fill out this form and give it to Steve before you go. But we will entertain public comment at this time, and we will...
And I will get to go. And I'm putting the microphone on for this just because I know it can get a little bit loud, so I would appreciate so that everyone can hear the comments. And they're being recorded, again, just as this whole meeting's been recorded by Phil on our team. So, it'll be, again, part of this. So, does anyone have a comment that, raise your hand, and we'll go from one to the next. And we've got a group over here. And, all right.
So we're from the skate park committee, and it got declined, but we're going to try to do the LWRP, is that what it's called? We're going to try to do that, and it should be pretty beneficial to the city, because there's already people that come to the skate park here now, and it's not very good. And with a better skate park, there would be lots and lots more people coming, and just more people walking up and down the streets, dropping their kids off and stuff. Could give local kids something to do, and just kind of benefit the community.
Another reason I think we should have the skate park is because it would give the youth something to do, so that they're not just out and about all day. And us that we skate in the streets, we're not running the risk of getting hit by a car. So we'd like to have that safety where we know that's not going to happen if we're at a skate park. Anyone else?
¿Me puedes traducir?
Yeah, I can translate.
En esta sala los dos únicos jóvenes que están de 14, 15 años son ellos.
So here in this room we have two young people, they're 14 and 15 years old.
Y han hecho un esfuerzo para presentar la propuesta al RIC.
they've brought the strength to bring the proposal here.
Yo como padre de familia he estado ayudando en lo que puedo,
Me as a father and family, I'm helping all that I can
porque ellos van a patinar en la calle aquí en Hudson.
because they're going to skate in the street right now in Hudson.
Y tengo miedo que un día aparezca golpeado por un carro.
And I'm scared that they're going to get hit by a car.
También porque prefiero apoyarlo en el deseo de construir un proyecto
I also want to support them in the wish to contribute a project
como este
like this
y no comprarle una pistola para que vaya a una escuela
and not to buy a gun, go to a school,
a sacrificar a otros niños.
and sacrifice lives.
Y también Ken
Also Ken,
es un ex profesional, es profesional de skateboard.
ex-pro skater.
Si no lo conocen ahora, ponete de pie, que te conoce la gente.
If you don't know him, now you do.
Ponte de pie. Él es un profesor ahora en una escuela aquí en los alrededores.
He's a professor now in a school near here.
Pero ellos lo contactaron para que les ayudara.
They contacted him to help them.
Él ha construido parques en diferentes partes del mundo.
He's built parks in different parts of the world.
En Siria, en Pakistán,
In Syria and Pakistan,
por ejemplo.
for example.
Y ahora está apoyando a ellos. Nosotros vamos a seguir insistiendo en esto. Vamos a apoyarlos a ellos porque es bueno que jóvenes como ellos, en vez de estar haciendo otras cosas, se metan a construir su propio proyecto.
We're going to keep supporting them and keep doing what we can to help them because this is a good kind of project for them to
Que le va a servir a otros jóvenes
They'll serve other young people
y a la comunidad en general.
and to the community at large.
Entonces, era lo que quería decir porque vamos a seguir en esto y aquí veo muchas caras conocidas, unas que los conozco, otros no, pero esperamos que también apoyen a ellos cuando salgan a la calle a buscar la ayuda de ustedes.
So this is what I wanted to say because we're going to continue and we know some of you and we don't know some of you and that you can support them also in making this happen. When you
Ellos
see
están
them in the street
buscando
also.
apoyo de una fundación de Tommy Hawk. Es una fundación que se dedica a apoyar proyectos de skateboard.
We're also seeking support from the Tony Hawk Foundation, which supports
Ellos
projects like
financiaron el
this.
proyecto del parque en Charo, por ejemplo,
They did a project in Chatham,
y ellos están buscando ayuda con esta fundación.
so they're also seeking support from that foundation.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. I thank everybody on the LPC for the work that you've done. I know it's been difficult. But I am really appalled about the funding of the Galvin projects, and I have to tell you why. There are only two people on the board of the Galvin Foundation, and one is one of the richest people in this country. That's number one. Number two, that they are bad actors in this community. We lost 1,000 people in the last census, and half of that number can be traced to the Galvin Foundation, or Eric Galloway, his obsessive acquisition of these buildings. They looted, and they had the Board of Housing Resources turn over that agency to them. It is nothing but a land grab that for $175,000 they put as an influx into the organization, and now they have got how many millions of $3 million worth of properties that they now control. Because I'm appalled at this. I hear these kids over here, and my heart breaks for them when you're giving one of the richest people in the country money to develop projects when they're just bad actors in this community. They're warehousing properties. They are almost invariably the worst property on every damn block in the city. And it's appalling. I hope that the people listening here from the state, I hope that you go back and you pull these things out of the grant and award it to something that is worthy of it. What they've done at Housing Resources is a real scandal. They took over that agency. They stopped the first-time homebuyers courses there. There's a bare bones. The home improvement program is barely running over there. It was nothing more than a land grab, and they shut down the only housing agency in this area. Now Rupco's taking up some of the slack, and the other agency up in Rensselaer, I forget the name. But we need a real housing agency working and to help people get their first homes in this community. You talk about building, housing, affordable housing. There's no more affordable housing than to get people their first home and help them build equity and get out of the poverty that they're in. So, and this agency, or the alleged foundation, they gutted the only agency that's doing it, and then they're opening up a goddamn homeless shelter in Greenport that's charging 28% more than what the going rate for the rooms are. I mean, it's outrageous. These are not good actors, and I really hope, please go back and look at what they're doing to this community and pull those damn grants.
In the district that was designated by the city, I have no clue. How a project outside of the designated bridge district with that accompanied seems absolutely impossible. Like, I can't imagine any other project being accepted outside of the district.
And unfair to the people who were outside of the district who didn't apply because they weren't in the district.
Yeah, it's connected. Yeah, Melissa, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but there's nothing outside of the district that...
The 200 block, what's the affordable housing in the 200 block of Orange Street?
That's a block off of Front Street. That's well within the district. It's 22. 24. It's literally half a block off of Front Street.
Okay, so the one that was on...
Third and Warren was cut.
Oh, the two that were cut are in the district.
Yes.
So all my other stuff stands.
Okay, that's fair. I just wanted to clarify because that's the reason that we heard public feedback about the 3rd and Warren Street, and it was pulled for that very reason. So, as were other projects that were outside of the district. So.
Matthew, are you talking about the Salvation Army project?
No.
That's on 3rd also.
No.
I just wanted to say that I agree.
No, they're moving to it.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
moving from that current location on 3rd.
I would like to second what Victor has spoken about. I think the Galvan situation is not compatible with the DRA project. We are under a tremendous amount of stress in this community. We are losing housing stock very rapidly, and it seems to be a slap in the face to include that in this DRI. Again, we have kids who need a skate park. We have other projects that perhaps got pushed out, and I think it's too bad that this has become part of the DRI submission. So I'd like to second what Victor has outlined. I am also concerned about the loss of our housing, the housing project that Galvan has taken over also. Thank you.
Any other comments from the community? I know it's getting late, and thank you so much for taking your time. You can either use this or not. Everyone seems to
probably don't need it. I'm Chris Stapleton from Digital Fabrication Workshop, and we had the privilege of showing quite a few members of the local planning committee around our facility and participating in some of the earlier stages of the DRI petition to the state. And throughout the process, I've been confused and a little bewildered by the conglomeration of our initial application with assorted entities, including workforce development, ambiguously included, although we support it. We didn't submit an application for that. The 99 South LLC, building owner, facade improvements for the warehouse have never been part of our application or our expressed intent. So while I've spoken to the building owner and the building manager repeatedly about whether or not they've had any direct contact with the DRI process or the LPC, they have indicated negatively that they haven't. And so the partnership ownership of Digifab is confused about how the application may have been evaluated, and whether or not that was a factor in its classification here. I frankly find that while we're pleased to have been involved in the process, confused by and not clear at all about what the warehouse facade improvements are intended to be or were intended to be, and how they ended up in here.
Infrastructure improvements outside of the warehouse built in to connect them to the circulation improvements that were going on in the exterior, but there was no project, like, ultimately there was no project going forward for that.
So is it perhaps just a misnomer on the project list that referenced that?
Perhaps it should just simply say the warehouse facade improvements, is that, and remove digifab.
Well, I was always wondering if that was a separate project, because we didn't know what it was, and we...
So there was no expansion?
Yes, there is. We've been working very hard down there for quite some time. In fact, we're the only manufacturing project on this list, and those of you interested in economic development probably are well informed enough to know that manufacturing jobs have the greatest economic development potential in terms of multiplier effect.
Chris, am I correct in, and maybe I completely missed this, I was under the impression that you withdrew the digifab part of the application, that you did not continue with your request to DRI, is that correct?
No, that is not correct.
Okay.
We did receive a CFA award.
Correct.
Under a grant that was substantially similar to the initial application for the DRI. And we were informed to resubmit a revised application if we wanted to be considered for an alternate project.
And did that happen?
It was delayed substantially, and it did happen last night.
Right, and so to be fair, Chris, I think that's the so setting aside the fact that there's probably just an error in what's put on here, if there was never a facade restoration component to your application, then there never was a facade component. That's not the merit that made or didn't make your application. It was that, to your very point, the day after the CFA awards were announced, or maybe 2 days, you and Melissa, as the other CFA awardee, were identified through Sheena's contact to say, hey, make sure this next project submission works, and we didn't get anything until last night. And to be fair to the other folks in the community who maybe wanted to apply and weren't in the Bridge District or didn't get anything in by January 3rd, which was the public cutoff date.
I wanted to add to further clarify that we, Chris, we met with you and discussed that you are a CFA recipient, you are part of the DRI. Is there additional projects? How do we clarify this whole? We sat in the office and went through all this in detail and indicated to prepare an application for another phase of the project that came in last week. And that was not long. I mean, I think I called the Hudson folks the day after the announcement because we're in the middle of the DRI, so all the CFA recipients I wanted to meet with immediately.
We acknowledge and appreciate that notice and regret that we weren't able to respond more expediently.
And secondly, if I'm not mistaken, the request you just came in primarily. The additional part of the project is to reimburse you for expenses already made at DigiFab and accomplishing your expansion.
And those that will be ongoing before we enter into a CFA contract.
Which has a funded CFA, and just for everybody's purpose, we do not fund projects costs that have already been incurred. That just absolutely doesn't happen. So some of most of what you submit is just not going to be eligible because they're costs incurred prior to having an agreement in place. So you can't incur costs. It's always but for our assistance for a project to happen. So how can it be but for if you're already spending the money making commitments? So it's looked at, believe me, very much.
And also, just as a point of clarification for the public, Basilica was not treated in any special partial way. They submitted something that was different.
Yeah, they refined their application.
After they received their, like DigiFab, but they went back and did a different thing. So that's why that's still here. It's a different thing.
Right.
Yeah, so not questioning that. My initial question was the warehouse and 99 South LLC.
Right. So I think what I'd like to ask of you is after today, based on the recommendations of the subcommittee, was to keep the project in the plan, but without a recommendation for funding because it needs work. needs some refinement. That's one area of refinement. If the scope and the identification of the plan as described is wrong, if it's going to stay in the plan, we want to make sure it's right for what the committee does support, because clearly the work that you're doing, the work you've done, the fact that you qualified for a CFA, the jobs you're creating is all central to what we're trying to do. You're right in the heart of it. So we wanted to make sure we included it in the plan to reflect that contribution on your part. But let's make sure we work on, in the next 2 weeks, the project profile for that, to make sure that it actually is accurate with what, to reflect what you really were looking to do.
And with respect to 99 South LLC, we're certainly not opposed to them improving the building, but since we don't own it, we're not in a position to do so.
It's not your project.
And we'd like to see them involved, particularly with some, there are certainly some areas that could really use some attention.
Yeah.
But we can't seem to get their interest.
Okay. So we'll work, the project profile team of Todd and Jeff will work with you on making sure that that's accurately written out in the submission. Okay. Duly noted. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there more comments, Melissa?
Melissa from Basilica, and apologies to the two-block problem, and still fully support what Victor said, regardless of the Bridge District. I just wanted to echo to the waterfront stuff, when this DRI opportunity came around, in the spring or whatever, when we knew we were going to be applying to the process, my only two comments, which I will put in the letter to the committee, et cetera, is that the Dunn and CAS, and to the questions that were raised by the committee, not knowing what those plans are, and those being the core of our Bridge District waterfront. I simply, truly believe that the RFP for CAS should be informed by the LWRP, the DRI, and we do backwards. And like Sheena, I know you work hard. I just think that without knowing what our district is, and without knowing what the waterfront is, you can't do DUNS and you can't do CAS. And one of the things that I've witnessed in my 10 years in Hudson is just a lack of big picture planning being implemented. That's why I was supportive of the DRI, because this is an opportunity for a lot of people to put a lot of thinking and a lot of long-term and real finances and real state and county city engagement. But until we have a plan for our waterfront, I just think it's insane to be developing $25 million projects with unknown, I think it's good to clean it up. The public hazard, I think CAS is more acceptable as far as prep it, be a safe piece of land, but it should be informed by what happens here. And then Dunn Warehouse, it got its $500,000 Restore New York for stabilization, $1 million. We're doing the entire schoolhouse, which is 5 times the size of that for $1 million. You don't need that much money for Dunn Warehouse without knowing who it's even going to go to. And if it's going to be a private thing, you need to figure out what's going to happen with the LWRP and what's going to happen with the whole district. And Hudson has grown away from its waterfront for 100 years. This is the time. And by the way, I do believe Basilica should be on the waterfront. We build our entire mission on being on the Hudson waterfront and committed to bringing film, people, action to a wasteland. Humans of all sizes and of all ages, and the fact that there's still no focus on that park makes zero sense to me. We can't put $1.5 million into a building from maybe a private investor without Hudson knowing what they're going to do with their waterfront. It's just, to me, I've been saying this since before we even applied. This is just, the only thing that got missed, other than what Colin said about what's going to happen to truck traffic, is just what's going to happen to our waterfront. And it's great, there's the pier project, but do not put, do not let a private developer come to our biggest asset that Hudson, New York has without having implemented any thought. I mean, I know you implemented thoughts, I don't mean that, but it just really, I cannot emphasize how much we need to plan our waterfront before we can let huge developers come in. That's, an LWRP, Nick, we've got to get the LWRP. Rick, I know that you're focusing, so that's my last comment. Is it just $1 million for the DUNS, 1.5? I don't think you need it for just stabilizing it. We need a plan, though.
Is there any other public comment?
Just a question is, how long will the public comment opportunity be available?
There's no formal public comment after this meeting. We're in the final stage of development. What I would say is if anyone has a comment, you want to get it in, and I have received a number of emails, and you can contact, you can put input on, I take that back, you can get input on the website. We've set that up so you can put comments right onto the website that will be recorded. You can also email me, steve.kearney@stantec.com, and I'll stick around if anyone wants to write that down. I got cards in my pocket so I can hand it to you so you can remember that.
All right. Yeah, and I would just say that the website is up, it will remain up, it will continue to be updated with the evolution of this plan and follow-up steps, and so that there's no limitation to the public comment on an ongoing basis about what follows. And public comment is encouraged and anticipated and appreciated on an ongoing basis to make sure that this lives up to all the expectations that are put forward. So that, many times the question was asked, what's the role of an LPC member? So those of you that are here in this community, your role does not change when you leave this table. It's to continue to engage the community and make sure that they are aware of the work that's coming out of this and the work that's going to happen on an ongoing basis. So.
And encourage feedback from the community.
Yeah, right.
And everybody that comes to me with a question or a comment, I just keep saying, please, don't just tell me, write it down. It becomes public record.
That's right. So after today, I'm sorry, just one follow-up. After today, after this comment that we digested from the video and the notes that Phil's taking and the comments received, that'll all be incorporated into this plan. Anything that happens after will help keep the public pressure on the people who are implementing, but won't be part of the formal document that goes to the state. So just to distinguish that.
There we go.
Yeah, in the back.
I just have a general comment about the whole process. And we all knew at the beginning, it's for shovel-ready projects. That's what you said. And my comment is that in the future, we find a way to get shovels to people who don't have them. We find a way to find ways for them to get to the shovels. Because it is a weighted process for people who have the shovels, who have the funds to do it. And we need to find a way to get those implements to people who don't have that.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any other comments from the audience? Okay, so thank you for those points and feedback. We appreciate it. And again, thanks to the community that's come out time and time again throughout this process. You're essential to this. So with that, why don't we have a vote? I think we're going to call for a vote, right, on this. So again, the document we passed out that we referred to is the project endorsement. So what we're endorsing is, again, a recommendation of these projects to go to the state for the next tier of review and vetting. It's the projects we reviewed. Separate, not included on this because this is just a list of projects recommended for state review for funding, are the projects that will be incorporated into the plan but not recommended for funding. So we speak to the DigiFabs and the other projects, right, that we spoke to before in the report, supporting future development through other sources of funding.
And I think it bears repeating too, based on the feedback that we've heard and all the work that's been done in committee as well, is that we're recommending these to the state. We're not guaranteeing that this is a list of projects that's going to be funded. That now becomes a decision at the state level.
You're asking us to vote now, or we're missing out on the committee?
Right, so the folks that aren't here, they will be asked in follow-up in the next 2 days.
Yes. Fill our concerns and return.
No, they
So
don't
our
ask
conflict, our ethical conflict. So again,
It's only your recusals.
so we're gonna vote on this full slate, up or down, yes or no, right? That this is going to advance to the next level. If you have an ethical restriction for your involvement in any of these individual projects, you would check next to it and note it on here, so that it's recorded for the record that your ethical conflict is transparent to everybody involved, right? We've had our conversation about the concerns about these, and that conversation can continue in part with the state as they continue to review these, both, as I said, from public feedback, post-submission, and through us individually. But we are at the stage now where we have a list of projects that are being recommended to the state. And so I'd like to ask for a show of hands in favor. Yes,
Point of order.
Yeah.
If we vote, isn't it difficult to ask the other members who are not here to vote after the vote has been taken?
Okay.
I mean,
they knew the
Shouldn't we
meeting was
submit
happening.
the
We
form
asked.
to each member? You basically get their vote by saying
Right.
yes or no. You then tally those afterwards.
and wait for the others.
You know what I mean? I don't, what do you think?
Come.
So 16 out of 22.
It's the same thing, but like a secret ballot, basically. That they get the ballots.
I don't need a secret ballot, I'm just,
But I think it's very important for all of them to have the vote.
That's fair, but not everybody showed up tonight. I can't force anybody to be here.
I didn't know this was coming until this morning, until we received an agenda.
Matthew, I think I could.
This is coming in October, right? So, you know.
And then we got it out, and next week we can end up ultimately having the vote.
Yeah, I think that's, yes, you'll get to the same ends. It's just, right. I got
Well, can we then
We'll just
say,
have a
we will
deadline
turn
tomorrow?
these in.
Yep.
The vote will continue for LPC members and put a deadline on it. You must vote, have your vote known by, pick it, Steve, what does it have to be, Wednesday,
Monday.
Friday?
I'd say Monday.
Oh, sorry.
Monday of next week because it's
Monday.
Thursday.
Thursday, so we'll make and put an email out. We've got this document, and it's just a matter of signing it. Not signing it, just your name, acknowledging, so that we know it's your vote, you're in, and then I'll create a tally and I'll turn it right around.
So we'll return these to you, Steve.
Does that
Yes.
satisfy the
Yes.
concerns?
And I'll make sure that I get them from everybody. So.
And anybody you haven't heard from by Monday doesn't
Isn't
choose to
there-
exercise their right to vote.
I just don't think it's fair to form a quorum here and now based on who's not having everybody here. Because I think those people would feel discounted and not a lot of time in it.
That's fair. So fill out your form, and that'll be your endorsement of the plan one way or the other, and we will collect them and tally them up.
I think I know the answer to the clarification is, on the ethical issues, it's not whether we have ethical concerns, it's if we have an actual conflict.
Yes, correct. Yeah, 100% correct. This is
Exactly.
Correct. If we approve the slate with recusal, is that a yes or a no?
It's a yes with your recusal for the projects that you select. Okay. Yeah.
everybody has to have the same
Now, before we finish, can we hear from more? Can I get everybody, the public can leave if you're ready. We have a last bit of business here to do. I do want to go over the schedule of what follows tonight's meeting, okay? So thank you. Yeah, you need to fill it out. Is there anybody who didn't fill out the sign-in sheet? Make sure you do that. If anybody didn't get this form back to me, make sure you do that. So the plan, or the schedule for completion of the plan at this point, right? So we have our meeting tonight. A revised draft Word document of the plan that I showed before is due. Sorry, hold on one second. So a revised draft Word document is due to the state and city planning team next Wednesday. Okay, so the document as it's been edited with Sarah's feedback and Betsy and everybody else has contributed is going to go back to the state next Wednesday. I will send this out tomorrow in its current version after a review. If there is any other edits that you have, our deadline of noon on Monday. If you don't get us your thoughts and comments by noon on Monday, they will not be incorporated in this plan when it goes back to the state on Wednesday of next week. Okay?
Are you sending us
Both.
two separate?
Yeah. Can we make sure that they go up on that FTP site?
Well, that's an FTP sites are temporary sites, right? So, and that went out 2 weeks ago. I will reboot that. It'll be up tomorrow morning.
Will that be the same version we saw before?
It's going to go out. It'll go out in a new email to the whole group, and it is a different link.
Substantially updated version of yeah. Incorporates edits received to date. Yeah. The state and city planning team and co-chairs will review and complete comments back to Stantec by the 12th, which is the following Monday, right? So a week and a half from now. The graphic layout complete version of the draft will go out to all of us no later than the 16th, right? So that's 2 Fridays, Friday from tomorrow. Again, 2 Fridays. 2 Fridays from tomorrow. The state city planning team and co-chairs conduct preliminary review and give okay to send to the LPC for review by the 21st. So by the 21st, you will get a copy of, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because I'm probably recorded. You'll get a copy of the drafted version with all the pictures and graphics and color and all that stuff by the 21st. And then we'll have until the 23rd, so just a 2-day turnaround to do final scrub of any edits and changes to the content of the document. Stantec will do their work over the final 2 days, and the plan's going in by the 30th. So